of technology, folks. 4 minutes late. It is 6:34. And it's 6:34 on a Wednesday. It's actually a pretty nice Wednesday. It's Wednesday, February 19th, 2020. Welcome to Radio Westchester. Sorry to be 3 minutes late. We have a new start time now. We're experimenting with it, but this is a firm start time, 6:30. So long as these little devices start working properly, they time out. Imagine that, a radio station and our devices time out. You can't make it up, but we'll fix it. I'm Bob Marrone. This is Radio Westchester. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am he. It's pretty nice out there considering. Let's hope it stays that way after all this endless rain, but you never know. Let's check out the weather. I'd have it in front of me if I wasn't fighting with this computer. Alrighty, it is already 38 degrees, going to get up to 40 some odd degrees today. We like that a lot. But we'll be back with the weather in just a minute. But first, we got to get to the headlines. And these are your headlines. Now, don't let this scare you because a lot of people are going to be frightened by what I'm about to say. But the coronavirus, there are 26 people quarantined in Westchester, just returning from China and an outbreak there. Most of them, though, so far, so good. They are suspects and they've been allowed to stay at home. They're being supervised by the Westchester Health Department. Mount Vernon, you can't make it up. It's in the news again. Officials there are saying that the city's liable for the tennis bubble demolition. Also, political favor is charged and leveled at the new deputy appointed in Mount Vernon. That's the deputy city clerk. It's just unbelievable what goes on in that city. We'll be talking with the news people today. We'll also be talking with former Mayor Richard Thomas at 9 o'clock. You won't want to miss that. A new cardiac rehabilitation program has opened in Yonkers, and gun rights activists are suing Rockland County over judges' concealed carry denials. And by now you already know, that's gun carry denials, and by now you already know the president has pardoned some 11 or commuted the sentences of some 11 people. What's interesting, one of them, Rob Blagojevich, the former the former governor of Illinois, and he spent 8 of a 13-year sentence. Alrighty, let's get to those stories, and then we'll be back with the weather in just a little bit. There are 26 people in Westchester County being quarantined after returning from recent travel to areas affected by the authorities. None of the Westchester residents who were affected by the disease. None of the Westchester residents who were being voluntarily quarantined, mostly in their homes, have shown symptoms. Now, Dr. Ambler, she is the head of the health department here in Westchester County, are saying, and I quote, "These people are not ill, but we still have to monitor them." And she said this during a news conference yesterday. Now, similar public health quarantines of travelers are underway in other communities statewide and across the country. The country health officials are saying it takes about 14 days to establish a proper diagnosis. Admissions by Mount Vernon officials regarding the demolition of the tennis bubble at Memorial Field should make the city liable, they are saying, for monies due to Keller tennis people. That's what they're arguing in court papers. And the company is asking for summary judgment of its lawsuit. It argued that former Mayor Andre Wallace and the planning commissioner, and he was the mayor interim after the former Mayor Richard Thomas left, he said they acknowledged that Keller Tennis was not in breach of its leasing agreement. But that's what they said. That's not what the former mayor said. And we will talk with the former mayor at 9 o'clock today. And again, these are the assertions by the Keller Tennis people. In many ways, some people could interpret this, yes, the city's liable, but maybe the city needs to go back 3 administrations, depending on acting mayors and not, before they make that final decision. Just unbelievable stuff in Mount Vernon once again. Another story, the reshuffling of the city clerk's office in that city began to take shape with an appointment of one William Holmes, who was sworn into the post by City Council President Lisa Copeland after the city voted 3-1 to give him the job. Now there are assertions that that particular position is a political favor from the city council president, and that it had been planned all along. That is some of the assertions being made. But once again, it's hard not to say this, and this is by way of commentary. The whole political system from whoever seems to be the mayor, as it juxtaposes the city council, as it juxtaposes the comptroller, is amateur night, and it has been amateur night for way too many years, and the people in that city should be speaking loudly and clearly. Maybe we'll hear from them, maybe we won't. In Harrison, the former police chief there can prove town officials acted unethically when they pushed him to retire. Former Chief Anthony Marrone sued the town in federal court in September to recover $183,000 in back pay. So what he's saying is they acted unethically. Don't you like it? Someone, I guess it's become the vogue. You go to jail, the prosecutors do their job, and then now the prosecutors are accused of acting unethically when it's, well, you maybe that broke the law. Police say that a 52-year-old woman was fatally stabbed at a library in Spring Valley on Tuesday. They say the incident occurred at the Finkelstein Memorial Library on Chestnut Street around 2 p.m. Officials say they responded to the library after multiple reports of a stabbing. When police arrived, they say they found the scene on the third floor with a reported suspect being held down by patrons. This in News 12 today. One, Sandra Wilson, was transported to Good Samaritan Hospital but died of her injuries. Police reported regular patrons of the library say the victim was a library security guard. Patrons described the victim as friendly, a grandmother, and someone who had a nice word for everyone. The alleged suspect, a 25-year-old Spring Valley resident, Blanchard Glaudin, was taken into police custody. As we pass through now, 6:41. Obviously, there was some work done here yesterday that shook the walls because some pictures are off the wall and the clock is half hanging over the desk, but we fixed it. This is Radio Westchester. I'm Bob Marrone. You're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone. Remember now, you can listen by going to MyTuner Radio. That is a podcast app. We also screen live, as you know. You can go to Mornings with Bob Marrone. You also can go to RadioWestchester.com. And this morning, as I look at the monitor proof, my hair is stuck down in front of my face, but other than that, we're available on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Periscope, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. Let's get back to the news. The St. Joseph's Medical Center opened a cardiac rehabilitation program to help patients with heart conditions achieve productive lifestyles. The outpatient physician supervised program, located at 530 Yonkers Avenue, is the only facility of its kind in that city, and it will offer many treatment plans that include instruction on physical activity, nutrition, and stress management. It is 6:42. This out of News 12 as well this morning. Members of Westchester's State Senate delegation got an earful Tuesday from concerned residents who are not happy about possible Medicaid cuts in the state's proposed 2021 budget. The budget forum was held at the Westchester County Center yesterday in White Plains. Resident Joe Bravo, one of the attendees, urged the county state Senate delegation to remember people with disabilities. Mr. Bravo said he is concerned because Governor Andrew Cuomo's 2021 budget proposal includes a plan to slash more than $2 billion in Medicaid funding from the state. And as you know, here in Westchester, those costs are pushed down to the county. Gun rights advocates are planning to sue some Rockland judges over their decisions to deny some concealed carry permits. This in News 12 this morning. Members of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community say there is an increase in interest in concealed carry permits following the recent, I lost my place looking for another news story here. Members of the ultra-Orthodox community say there is an increase in interest in concealed carry permits following the recent Hanukkah attack at a home in Muncie. The lawsuit comes as Governor Cuomo proposed gun control bills in his budget, and dozens more make their way through the legislature. One, Eric Melanson, said, "I regard them as tyrannical." Again, talking about the rules. It's just a way, or the law, it's just a way for people up top to have control over the people below them. And that really drives me crazy. It is 6:44. President Donald Trump just appointed himself America's judge and jury, according to one particular analysis, casting even deeper doubts on whether the nation's impartial justice system can withstand his expanding political clout. The president said, and we quote, although once again, I need to enter this in deference to the president. I don't think he really understands some of these issues, and I think sometimes he articulates things on, and I'm really cutting him some slack here, but I think I need to. I think the president's interpreting the fact that the chief law enforcement officer works for him, that makes him the top chief enforcement officer, because he said, and I've seen the tape of it, I've seen it. He said, I'm actually, I guess, the chief law enforcement officer of the country. Now, a lot of people are going to jump on that. And yes, he shouldn't have said it. And yes, he's going to get grief even from his attorney general. And he's wrong. But one could see why he would do that. He doesn't pay attention to a lot of details. So on one hand, we can't throw him under the bus for not paying attention to details, and then, if you will, for not paying attention to details, and then hold him accountable for being strict in terms of what he interprets. We got to cut him a little slack. It is 6:46. Welcome to Radio Westchester. Let's take a look at the show. We've got a juggled show today. Vince's going to come on at 7. Harlan Ullman is with us in the early shift today. So many of you who don't get to hear, who are already to work or don't listen to our long form 9 o'clock hour, which is also turned into a specific podcast. Harlan Ullman is an internationally renowned national security expert. And he is as good as it gets. He's been a destroyer commander, a swift boat commander. He instructs colleges. He's an advisor to our senior generals, to the State Department, to the Pentagon, to NATO, to the Atlantic Council. He's an author. We'll be talking with him from 7:50, 7:20 right through 8 o'clock. Then we're going to open up the phones to get some calls. We haven't gotten in the last couple of days. I know Mitch is interested in getting in, and some other folks. We'll do that. We'll be talking with Ivar Hayden. But now at 9 o'clock, because of all the things we see, and I need to give you a little background on this. The former mayor of Mount Vernon, Richard Thomas, sent out an email to all the news stations, and at least he can know that we read it. And his point was, now that the comptroller has threatened, and she did, we have it on tape, has threatened the new mayor to do to her what she did to Richard Thomas, and we're paraphrasing now, how come the news isn't interested in that? And also what I find curious, but just curious, it doesn't mean that the difference in opinion doesn't matter, but this is when you get into personal politics, perhaps over what the right thing to do is. Now, after Richard Thomas knocked down those tennis courts, the law will decide whether he should have, could have, or had the authority to do that. After Richard Thomas left, the acting mayor, Andre Wallace, said, yeah, it was the wrong thing to do. And from a standpoint of institutional decisions, I'm not sure if that was the right thing to do and if it just wasn't said to screw the previous mayor. Now, both things are possible. But what we're going to do, and we'll let anyone come on, the controller's welcome to come on any day of the week. Any ex-mayor is willing to come on any day or any hour of the week. But we're going to talk to Richard Thomas at 9 o'clock and get his take on what's going on there and also what's going on in the city council. And we certainly will make available for anyone else. But for those who are in the political power infrastructure here in Westchester, and I'm talking about the Democratic Party, Reggie Lafayette, and all of the other folks who decide who gets to be on the ballot and not, we do hope you're troubled by this, that we're not letting what happened in Mount Vernon go. Something's rotten in a little more than Mount Vernon, and we don't have the wherewithal to know it, but maybe some of the players will as we invite them on our broadcast. We do need to go back to the weather in just a moment, but we also need, in that vein, to get to it. And I know I was a little hard on the technology before because I get very impatient with technology, and that's no knock to the people that created it. This is a wonderful radio station with great technology. But from my point of view, I have, and it's my own thing, I have no patience with technology that isn't easy to use and isn't intuitive. It's just me. So I hope you'll forgive me for throwing the technology under the bus earlier, but that's kind of, to be fair, it's kind of how I roll. It is 38 degrees, and once again, it's Wednesday, February 19th, 2020, and I tell you, some of the news we see, what's your take, for example, we're not opening up phones just yet, actually we will. What's your take on the situation with Aaron Judge? He's all upset now. He thinks that the Astros should give up their pennant. I don't know what that means, though. All you're doing is taking away a piece of hardware. They need to move on Major League Baseball. No, I don't blame the players for being upset, but something else is in the water here. And I heard it on a number of outlets over the last 2 days. Where were all the ball players who were complaining now? They weren't complaining when the PED crisis was at its height. And all that does, folks, is lead us to believe that so many people were doing PEDs at the time, they didn't dare. They didn't dare mention it. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. This is Radio Station. Actually, we're the radio station at the train station. We'll be right back. Alrighty, let's take a look at the weather. It looks pretty nice out there. Broken clouds it is, and I got to double check this now. It's 41, but it feels like 35, a little overcast. Today, the forecast, we are looking at mainly clear as the weather gets colder tonight with lows around 22, so get used to it. But today, again, mostly clear, sunny, highs around 42. Tonight, mainly clear and cold with lows around 22. Thursday, partly sunny and a little breezy. Still windy, though. Wind out of the northwest, 10 to 15 miles an hour. Wind chills will mainly be in the 20s throughout the day with highs around 34 degrees. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And the bottom of the hour has been supported by our friends at the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Pena and Kong, plug-in virtual reality, and Dominic's Fine Cigars. And it's a good thing I didn't make those bets yesterday with our guru, Jake Schaefer, because if I got it right, I would have lost a lot of games last night, a lot of upsets, a lot of strange scores in the hockey world. But nonetheless, we have a number of different things going on here. Again, baseball keeps dominating the news. So does what will happen with some football quarterbacks as we get into sports. As you probably heard yesterday, Drew Brees is coming back at the age of 40. to play for New Orleans. And that's probably going to be his last year there. And nobody knows where, if you will, nobody knows where the great quarterback for the New England Patriots is going to go. Most people think he's going to stay with the Patriots, and some people think that the management may not want him there anymore, particularly the coach. But we shall see where Mr. Brady goes. Again, the biggest rumor, and we've heard it from Jake, is that he will go, if he does leave, to the Chargers, maybe for a piece of the ball club. So we shall see. Meanwhile, the Mets have this one player who's got a he's got a leg brace the size of a tree log, and no one's ever actually said what's wrong with his leg. And he was out last year. I think he only played 9 games. So we shall see. We do have an issue with the Devils. They got their butt kicked last night, 3-0 by the St. Louis Blues. And that really was the only local score that I could get my hands on today. And those are just some of the things going on in sports. Now, in the news in general, the big story, of course, is the president's pardons. Now, on one hand, I always thought, and this is just me, that Rod Blagojevich, and it's interesting, it almost shows a little bit of my own innate hypocrisy, and we all have that. I thought that Rod Blagojevich, and I covered it extensively back in the day in my old station, we had a White House correspondent from Fox News. And again, the hard news people were always great at Fox, and the radio people particularly. And we would talk each and every day about the Blagojevich scandal. And it was a scandal. I mean, the guy sold... he sold his Senate seat. When Barack Obama left to run for president and then got elected, he said, you can't get this for free. You've got to come up with some money if you want to run for the Senate. So he got caught doing that, and he got caught in a couple of other deals where he was exchanging favors for a campaign or other cash. So I thought 13, 14 years was a lot. There are people who do a lot worse than he. So I was kind of, when I saw that, I said, gee, it's a nice thing to do by the president. That just seemed like an excessive. So that's what I've always hoped that the pardon would be used for people in rather complicated or strange situations. But we saw it with Bill Clinton, with Mr. Rich, and obviously Mr. Trump is probably looking to pardon some people. Those are the ones that trouble you, the people that were pals of a president. But I like the Blagojevich one. I didn't like the Carrick one because that guy is just a lowlife who got lucky, Mr. Carrick, and he's obviously a friend of Rudy Giuliani. But again, the thing that needs to be stressed, if I keep howling on these microphones that as long as it's within the rules, you do it, well, you know what? It's the president's allowed to do it, and we just have to bite our lip and shut up. We elected him. And after an impeachment, we let him stay. So it is what it is. And that includes, as much as it would be distasteful for me, as much as it probably make for a great monologue, if he pardons, should he Roger Stone or some of these other people? Well, you know what? That's his right too. Now, some of the other noteworthy people that he did pardon, well, at least changed it so that they're no longer criminals, is Michael Milken. Guys like Michael Milken, go and watch the old movie Wall Street, okay? They cost companies their livelihoods. They cost individuals their livelihoods. They ripped you off. I don't like that he got a break. Now, separating out the fact that I don't like it from whether or not it's legal is separate issues. The president has every right to do that. And if we don't like it, then we should change the process. He also did, and again, when he does this after someone's already in and out of jail, it erases their record. He, former state San Francisco 49ers owner, for those of you who like to mix football or sports with these things, he was sentenced to 2 years probation and received a $1 million fine in 1998 after pleading guilty to a charge of failing to report a felony after he paid $400,000 to former Louisiana Governor Edward Edwards in exchange for a riverboat gambling license. Some of the others, I really don't know who they are, but these are some of the ones where the president obviously felt bad for people. One person, Tynese Nickel, served nearly 14 years in prison for allowing her apartment to be used to sell drugs. Crystal Muniz, 12 years in prison for her role in a marijuana smuggling ring. And that's pretty consistent with some of the things that we see day in and day out of people getting sentences that were probably extreme. The other real big issue in the news, and he's doing better than I had hoped. And again, saying I had hoped, I made no bones about way before. And I'm going to do a Rush here or some of the other great broadcasters where they say, I told you so. And 6 months ago, 7-8 months ago, I was on this idea that Michael Bloomberg should run. He will be in the debate tonight, and he is coming on. I do believe he's going to be the nominee. Unless the party just goes berserk and has one of its far left people run, Bernie. And boy, I got to agree with Vince, who should be calling any minute. And I'm just never sure about the old phone number. So for those of you who are out there, you can call us at 914-999-4006. And that regards, I'm sorry, I lost my my mental place. That involves some of the other candidates. They really are riding off the rails, and I am just troubled by it. I don't want to see Bernie Sanders, as much as I like some of his ideas, and I think he's a decent man who cares. We can't afford his presidency, and frankly, a socialist is just not going to make it. And as Vince Russo says, he thinks that Elizabeth Warren has gone round the bend. So we shall see. Now, a guy I haven't thrown under the bus lately, who really, I don't know if he works for Trump. I don't know if he's I don't know if he's the Monica Lewinsky of the White House, but Michael Goodwin. when it looked like, well, he's been supporting Trump in every which way, but it's just amazing. Michael Goodwin was a great columnist once, but once they gave him a major page in the Post, he went round the bend. But now that Michael Bloomberg is in most of the minds of moderates, is now the front runner. Now he puts a column today. I don't read him anymore. I had to stop. He says, too bad he's left his sentences. And look, he's right. There are things about Michael Bloomberg that are to the left, but it is no coincidence that that this writer, Mr. Goodwin, is doing the bidding of the White House, because now instead of attacking Joe Biden, he's now attacking Michael Bloomberg. But again, well, that's a nice race, though. Bloomberg and Trump, I like that. Let's go to the phone. I do believe that Vince is with us. Good morning, Vince.
Hey, Bob. Good morning.
I just gave you a compliment. Well, sort of. You were right about Elizabeth Warren. I saw her up on stage. Has she lost her cookies?
Well, I think so. I've said that from the beginning. She's, to me, she looks and sounds like a raving lunatic. But, people like her, and, I think she's really plummeted, though, in the...
yeah, she has. She's off.
In the polls.
She's not in play anymore. She's not in play anymore.
And
I don't think so. But, I'm doing a Rush Limbaugh, I told you so, the way it ought to be. I've been calling for Michael Bloomberg to run for how many months now? Long before it became fashionable. It just seemed to me to be the right. Now, again, I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's, you know what it is? We all have to change our attitude on what's perfect, what's good, and good, better, best.
Well, he's going to be on the debate stage with the rest of the crew tonight. The only thing that troubles me with that is the Democratic National Party, the DNC, I guess, they're constantly changing the rules of the game. There's never this consistency where here it is, this is what you have to do, and you go forward. They did the same thing last time when Bernie looked like he was going to get the nomination, and between conspiring with Hillary and this whole nonsense with these super delegates and all that, they kind of took the nomination away from him. And people are wondering now, you read some news accounts and the comments about them, and people are constantly saying, well, let's see who their chosen person is, because people feel that the primaries are really a charade, in that the DNC is going to pick the nominee, whoever they want. Most people thought it was going to be Joe Biden in the beginning, but Joe's star seems to have faded a bit. And, so now it looks like Bloomberg is the one that they're going to be promoting. I think
One can
Bloomberg
hope.
has the best chance of winning. I think if Sanders wins the nomination, every other word you're going to hear is socialist, and the American people have no clue
Absolutely.
what that even
Although,
means.
you know what's interesting? How and Bernie got suckered. Bernie got trolled. He's now bragging about how Fox News treats him better than MSNBC does. Do you think he realizes why? Of course, Fox News wants him to run against Trump because Trump will beat him.
Right.
Bernie, come on. You know what the problem with Bernie is? Bernie, he's in any court, and I use that in the general terms of when a leader has a court and advisors. He's a voice, to quote Beckett, or the great play by Jean Anouilh. His is a voice that needs to be heard, and some of his ideas need to be incorporated into the existing welfare state. But his all or nothing methodology that he would employ is just not going to fly here.
No.
And what was the rest of that line? Yes, yours is a voice that needs to be heard, but not too loud, not too often.
To conflate two stories, I think the next round of pardons Trump is going to put forward is for the Houston Astros.
Oh, what do you think of that? What's your take on that?
Well, I've said it a number of times that I believe that they should vacate the World Series, that they should declare that there is no winner, and take the trophy away from them. I think that the players are rightfully PO'd about this thing. And, there's all of this speculation about whether there's going to be a beanball contest, as a result of all of this when teams play the Astros. And I wouldn't want to see that. I mean, that I think would be crazy. But, one thing that could happen, and I don't think it will, is maybe players will get together and say, you know what, we're not going to play them. We just refuse to play them.
Maybe. You know what? I'm almost tired of it because I think that people are missing the plot. The plot is that baseball overreacted. They handled it badly. They should have said, we really need to crack down on this and lessened, quite frankly, the severity of it, because all teams try and steal signs, and they just went too far. And they should have just laid down the new law and went forward, because there's so much cheating in baseball, particularly in that regard. But don't you find it curious that these players weren't yelling and screaming during the PED scandal?
Yeah, well, that's true. But I think what that was very dispersed throughout the league. You had Mark McGwire, and you had
a lot more people doing it than those.
Barry Bonds, and all of these people doing it. But they were individual players spread throughout the whole league. This is a concerted team effort that resulted in I was going to say Super Bowl. It resulted in a World Series, and I think that that's really where they were. That's what the source of the angst of most of the players now, especially the pitchers. Because a guy saying, "Hell, I got in there, got the tar knocked out of me because these people knew exactly what pitch was coming every time I'm throwing the ball, and rightly or wrongly, it tarnishes my record." I'm sure there were guys who got sent to the minors and never returned as a result, and so there was a lot of implications for players. And the American public has this sense of fairness, and they feel that the Astros cheated and they should not be World Series champions.
Boo-hoo. I'm really changing on this. A, it's only sports. B, we take it too seriously. C, baseball is just in that way. In other words, if we take all this stuff too seriously, we're missing the point. these athletes are always trying to get an edge, always trying to get an edge. And I think they should punish some people, but then I just think they should move on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they should move on too. I mean, but I think moving on consists of taking the World Series title away from them and just saying, and like you were saying earlier, it's a piece of hardware, but people don't look at it that way. People say this is symbolic of what it's supposed to be, the best in the sport, and these guys were clearly caught cheating. It's like the Black Sox scandal in the early part of the last century, and they shouldn't be allowed to call themselves World Series champions because they didn't do it in a fair and honest way.
So you don't think they should just get an asterisk? You think that they just should be?
No, I think they should. I think they should vacate this.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay,
yeah,
so not just put it in with an asterisk.
Not an asterisk. There should be no World Series winner for that year.
Okay, I buy that. That works. I'll take that. We're talking with Vince Russo here on Radio Westchester. You still have this miserable cold. It's Wednesday, February 19th.
Yeah, I'm just about done with it. I'm really curious to see tonight what Michael Bloomberg does on the debate stage with the other candidates.
He's not Mr. Excitement,
No, he's not at all. But I think he's going to be I think straightforward, give his opinions about various policy issues. And I think every one of them are going to be harping on the fact that he's a billionaire. And what's interesting about that, if all of these candidates were able to raise the amounts of money that he has,
well, they do the same thing.
They would do the same thing.
But
they would spend it, with advertising and do whatever they do.
I've been very, very fair about this guy. Yes, I want him to be president because he's very capable. He's very balanced. He's very thoughtful. And I've criticized some of his overly liberal policies and some of the people that work for him. He's got his own cult of personality. But the fact of the matter is, and I was there and you were there too, he built this company with his own hands. He hired very talented people who I got to know. He went to the Merrill Lynch trading desk, said, hey, I'll give you guys a third of the company if you let me use your data and your traders to develop an application I think will be wonderful for the fixed income markets.
Well, so
he did it himself.
The other billionaire, Tom Steyer,
right?
He built his company. The other guy who was a complete wingnut, Ross Perot, built his company from the ground up.
In fact, Michael Bloomberg did it with severance pay.
Yeah, but I think what the difference we have here is that Bloomberg is a proven executive, political executive, having run New York City for 3 terms and done it very, very effectively. I think one of the things that's kind of a shame is this retrograde history, where now he's saying, oh, stop and frisk was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake.
I wish he wouldn't do that.
Very effective.
I wish he wouldn't do that at all.
But it's politically correct now to go back and revisit some of these other old policies that actually worked very well, but it's not politically in the mainstream now.
Allow me to do and get your reaction to this, as you worked on Wall Street for part of your career as well. In fact, 2/3 of it, actually. Why he gave, and this is a pardon after a guy's no longer in jail, it wipes out his record. Now, I don't know if he gets his fine back. For example, they fined Michael Milken $600 million. But one of the things I've been squawking about on the radio for a decade, for people who don't work on Wall Street, is unfortunately the mindset that permeates Wall Street. And I know it's needed, but these guys were still heroes even after they went to jail. The Michael Milkens and every other big swinging so-and-so that ripped off money, these guys are still icons on Wall Street, and the general public doesn't know that. And it bothers me. And I wish, again, it's the president's right, I wish he hadn't let Milken off the hook, because he hurt more people, he ruined more careers, he screwed up his company, he screwed up an entire market, and hurt a lot more people than the guy that goes in and robs a 5 and dime store.
Well, I question this whole pardon.
Well, yeah, it should be.
Power. The Constitution permits the president to grant pardons and such like that. The original intent, if I can bring back Justice Scalia, was that if there was some egregious
that's what I was saying earlier.
miscarriage of justice that the president identified, he could step in and say, hey, look, But it was supposed to be a very infrequent use of the power, and it's not like it's become now with modern-day presidents where it's hundreds of people that they pardon. I mean, it was supposed to have been one or two cases that was brought to the president's attention, and he took some action on that, saying, oh, yeah, look, the person got sentenced to 99 years for having one marijuana joint.
Right, exactly. Well, the two incidents that got to me, one was Richard Nixon's pardoning of Jimmy Hoffa, who gave $500,000 to his campaign, and the other was President Clinton's pardoning of, I guess it was Frank Rich, a guy who donated to his campaigns.
Yeah.
And those things are abhorrent.
I think it was Adam Rich. Frank Rich was a New York Times columnist.
That's right. Well, it was one of the rich guys. It's like one of my daughter's best friends' name was Winnie. I used to ask how her brother Lefty was, left knee, right knee, because I'm an idiot. Now another guy, a guy. Thank God they caught it when he applied for a job. Do you realize this Bernard Kerik? If you read into his life. This guy is a low-life skell who actually became police commissioner. And it's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
I mean, and so he gets out because he's,
Rudy's friend.
Rudy's friend. The only way to get a lot of these guys that were involved in the Russia deal is we're going to have to find New York charges. Otherwise, they're all going to get pardoned. The president's going to pardon Stone, I think. Which he can, and he's allowed to. And we got to live with it. Okay? We do. But, in fact, I wish he would do that rather than go into the Justice Department and try and say, I am. Now, you did see his quote yesterday.
Yeah.
That I'm the chief law enforcement officer. But I think that's just how he interpreted it. We can't on one hand call him naive and then not realize when he's being naive. He just thinks that because the chief law enforcement works for him, that makes him the chief law enforcement officer. And I could see why he might say that.
Well, he says that because he thinks he can do whatever the heck he wants to do.
Well, he can now.
And now he can because he's, after that's why I thought that this whole impeachment thing was a huge, huge mistake. And, I realized that, people say, well, if he did wrong, he should be impeached, whether they were able to convict him or not. But, from a practical point of view, it just emboldened him now to do what the heck ever he wants. And I think it's going to hurt them in the campaign because he's going to, say, see, I was exonerated. I didn't do anything wrong.
Listen, we did a story. No, we didn't. I'm saying we did it in your honor, but we did it because it was local and in the news. But I don't know if you listened to our news broadcast today, but gun rights advocates are planning to sue some Rockland judges over their decision to deny some concealed carry permits. Members of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community say there was an increase in interest in concealed carry permits following the recent Hanukkah attack at a home in Monsey. Very interesting. You had mentioned this yesterday, which is why I bring it up. He said the lawsuit comes as Governor Cuomo proposes gun control bills in his budget, and dozens more make their way through the legislature.
Well, in New York and especially here in New Jersey, the issuance of carry permits has been totally arbitrary and capricious. That it has nothing to do with,
It's agenda-driven.
Yeah, I mean, here in New Jersey, it's virtually impossible to get a carry permit. I mean, it's just one of those things that, it's on the books, you can't apply, and, they might as well just say, citizens need not apply because you just can't do it. And there's cases working their way through the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court just heard a case in New York where the New York Rifle and Pistol Association sued the city because people had a permit to have a handgun in their home. They call it a premise permit, where you can have it on your premise. And the city did not allow those people to take that gun and go to a firing range or go to a second home they may have in Long Island or in New Jersey or whatever it may be. And, they went to the Supreme Court after the Supreme Court granted certiorari, which means that they said, yes, we are going to hear this case. The state of New York said, oh, okay, well, we're going to change that law around already, so you guys don't have to rule on it. And the Supreme Court said, once we grant cert, we are going to hear this case, and, so that we can rule on whether that effort in terms of New York State is constitutional or not. And I think that's going to have a big effect. We've got a number of lawsuits pending with the Supreme Court here in New Jersey over the whole carry permit issue, in that citizens applying for a carry permit are just not granted them because the state or the local judges or whatever just don't want people to have carry permits. And it's not the way the process works. So we'll see how it wends its way through the court.
And we'll see how you do as you wind your way through the day. We have to go. Harlan Ullman's coming up next. Vince, thank you very much. Good report.
Good to see you tomorrow, Bob.
Talk to you later. We'll talk with Vince again tomorrow. It is time to get to Harlan Ullman on. And I have to handle this manually. But I have no issues in doing that. Stay right there. We took care of our housekeeping chore. You're listening to Radio Westchester. This is your radio station at the train station. We are broadcasting on 7 different outlets today. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, iTunes, iHeartRadio, RadioWestchester.com, Mornings with Bob Marrone. Go to MyTuner Radio. You can go on the app and you will do fine. We have a nice day today. It is sunny. It's going to be a mixture of sun and clouds, mostly sunshine. Getting down, though, to the mid-20s tonight. It's going to be a little cooler than we expected. But beyond that, a nice night ahead tomorrow. More of the same. The weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And I just got a call. I hope we're broadcasting and reaching everyone. Hold on. Let me just be sure that they know we are on. All right. I just got a text in from someone. I mentioned earlier that we reorganized the today's schedule to accommodate the schedules of others. Now, many of you who listen to our long-form interview at 9 o'clock know how good and useful this man is. And for those of you who haven't heard him at an earlier time, well, we're graced to have him now. His name is Harlan Ullman. He is an author, a columnist, but most notably internationally renowned as a national security expert. He advises governments, companies, generals, or if you will, military establishments around the world, teaches at war colleges. His most recent book, Anatomy of Failure, How America Loses the Wars It Starts. Please welcome Harlan Ullman. And Harlan, you forgive me for having to go through a whole part of your resume again, but you always get a different audience at different hours. So,
you present a different resume then.
Well, yeah. Well, you've done so many things. I never know which one to highlight. You know, I've gone on the web several times. Which things? And I looked at your background, which is always extraordinary. I did want to cover before we get to the president's pardoning people, which is the head of the zeitgeist. Another story is out there that will be news after the debate tonight, and that is the possibility of a truce, if you will, or a treaty between the United States and the Taliban. Is that going to be worth the paper it's printed on, and how valuable can this be?
As we know, hope is not a strategy. This goes back to the Vietnam War and all the truces and ceasefires that put into place, and that war went on and on and on and on. at this stage, I don't see why there's any reason for the Taliban to want to negotiate anything more than a simple ceasefire. You have to realize that the Taliban are not a hierarchical organization, but they're very, very spread out, diffusion of leaders and so forth. As you also will know, the Afghan election has just been decided in Ashraf Ghani's favor, but his main rival and chief executive of Afghanistan, Abdullah, is protesting that. And so it seems to me that from a strategic Taliban perspective, this truce or ceasefire probably aids them. Will it last? I hope it does. I don't think it will. And I don't see peace in our hand in Afghanistan for a long time to come.
So then why do this? I mean,
it has tactical advantages. I think it will end up trying to use this as leverage on Ashraf Ghani, who's already under assault from his main rival, and perhaps the Taliban may be able to gain significant inroads and agreements, which, having once put them in their pocket, they then say, okay, we're going to no longer honor the ceasefire, and then when the next ceasefire occurs, they'll want to go on and get greater agreements from the government. That would be my guess.
Okay, well, we can hope that works. I just can't help but feel that it's such a lawless place with so many factions. I want to just go...
Bob, it took Alexander the Great, if you want to go back, more than 2,000 years, who was forced out of Afghanistan. And he did so by marrying the daughter of one of the local warlords. So Afghanistan has a long history of being the graveyard of empires.
Okay, now another country in that area we need to talk about, well, a little further east, I guess, Turkey. They're in the news again. They're having some issues with Russia. And I can't tell if we get along with Turkey anymore or not after what we did with the Kurds some months ago. What is the issue between Russia and Turkey now?
Well, there are many issues. Turkey, as you know, is a member of NATO, but it's always been a very truculent member of NATO simply because it wanted membership at one time in the European Union, which was denied largely because of its Turkish and Muslim background. And so, on the one hand, it's vital to have Turkey in the alliance because it's got the second largest army. Its geography and location are really important on the southern end of the Black Sea and obviously the eastern end of the Mediterranean. And they're a bulwark against potential aggression by Russia. On the other hand, Turkey wants to be more independent, more autocratic, do things that it sees its interest, not necessarily the alliance. It still feels rejected by having not been allowed to enter the EU. And so it's been doing deals with Russia, buying S-400 anti-air missiles and other purchases. And now with Russia, it has an issue over what's happening in Syria because, as you know, the possibly final assault against Idlib is creating at least 800,000 refugees have got no place to go. The Turks want the border closed, obviously, because they've already got 2 million Syrian refugees there. And so you have a combination of a huge humanitarian crisis and differences between Russia and Turkey as to how to end the assault on Idlib. So it's a very, very thorny problem. The American National Security Advisor, Bob O'Brien, said the other day that the United States has no interest in intervening into that situation, let the Turks and the Syrians and the Russians work it out. But the problem is that if that happens, you're going to have thousands, tens of thousands of dead innocent Syrian civilians on one's hands, and you might see an immigration problem even greater than the one that took place 3 or 4 years ago when the civil war in Syria reached a high point.
You know, a couple of things. Now, you follow this and you do this and you worry about it for a living and you advise governments and military-industrial complexes, for lack of a better word, about these kinds of things. But one of the things that I find confusing, if there were to be a peace in Syria, I'm not sure I know what parties would be at the table anymore. So many different people involved.
No, there would only be one party. That would be the Assad government.
Okay, but versus who?
Nobody. They would want total control. The Kurds would be isolated to Kurdistan, and there will always be this hostility between the government and Ankara and the Kurds. The Kurds are the unwanted people in that entire region, which includes Iraq and Iran. And so what this is a zero-sum game. in the sense that Assad wants total control of his country at any price.
But
and the Russians are prepared to help him.
But who is he fighting at this point? Who would be the counter
His people.
party? His own people. So he's
Absolutely.
fighting an insurgency.
His insurgency is a civil war. You've got many Syrians who don't want to live under Assad. They're being called terrorists. There are also terrorists who don't want to live under anybody. And so you've got this complex situation. And from Assad's view, he's not going to take any prisoners literally. And therefore, there's not going to be any peace negotiation. It's almost a sense of unconditional surrender of the other side, and the other side is a complex mix of enemies and adversaries of Assad and the central government of Syria.
Well, okay, that's what I wanted to understand. Who is funding? And I guess the funding comes from various sources, because certainly for the war to go on this long, they obviously have to have resources and assets. Who are their chief sponsors?
Well, lots of it does come from radical Arab money. There's no doubt about it. Certainly the remains of the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda and other variants are using sales of oil in the black market. I'm sure there's some Kurdish money being involved. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of American CIA money being involved in terms of supporting people who are on our side, principally the Kurds. Mm-hmm. But quite frankly, the opposition really does not have much of a military. They're basically guerrillas. They're basically fighting with small arms and hand grenades and RPG-7s, and those are not terribly expensive. This is not a major army fighting a major army. It's a major army or a significant army fighting a group of terrorists who are really using rather handheld and those kinds of weapons.
Well, they obviously seem to be putting up quite a fight after all these years. Quite
not
remarkable.
Really. The problem here is that when you go through cities, it takes a long time to clear cities. And in fact, the Syrian army is not terribly proficient. And so this is more of a one-sided slaughter than it is really an actual conflict.
So is it fair to assume that at some point in time, through attrition and time, of course being involved with attrition, that Syria will prevail?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so that is inevitable. And to the extent for our listeners, what is Iran's role here? Is it overstated?
No, Iran's role is to support either Shia or those groups that are disposed to it and opposed to Saudi Arabia, and also to groups that are in Iraq that want to maintain a Shia leadership in Iraq and an anti-American role. And so Iran is sponsoring those forces in the greater Middle East whose vision supports their vision. First of all, hostility towards Israel and hostility towards Saudi Arabia, with the ultimate goal of ejecting the United States from the region. And so there are many groups that obviously will fall under that banner and hasten to support Iran, who is spending quite a substantial amount of money to that end.
731, we are talking with internationally renowned national security expert Harlan Ullman. While we're in the region, what's the latest on Iraq? They've got a lot of their own problems, obviously, and how does it affect us?
It's a lurking time bomb. Iraq wants us out. They're going through a change of government, which is very difficult with elections forthcoming. And so because of other issues, Iraq seems to be on page 15 of any newspaper.
I know.
But this is still a very tenuous situation, which is not getting better, and simply because the press is focusing on places like Syria and obviously the virus in China, it's not getting the attention. But this is still a time bomb that's in the process of exploding.
I thought that would be the case, and thank you for updating us on that. Now, let's go to the fun and games going on. Michael Bloomberg is, at least in my view, gaining more traction than even I had hoped, or so it seems. That's certainly in the news. And, of course, the pardons and commutations yesterday by the President of the United States. Again, this is all legal. He gets to do this. But is there a larger implication here?
Yes.
What is it?
My column, not this week, for next week, my column this week is on the stupid gene, which accounts for why we do many, many stupid things.
Yeah, I like that.
Next week it's going to be called Prime Minister Trump.
Ah, that's
And
interesting.
what Donald Trump has done is to turn our republic and democracy into a constitutional parliamentary system
Mm-hmm.
in which the House of Representatives has become the House of Very Commons and the Senate has become the House of Lordlings, in which all that President Trump needs is the support of the Senate, which he has 53-47, that ensures the Senate will do his bidding as in a parliamentary system.
Mm-hmm.
And as Prime Minister, as Churchill did during World War II, and I know Churchillian fans will find this offensive, Trump is emulating Churchill and putting a finger in every single pie he can.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the House of the Very Commons has become, like the House of Lords, relatively powerless, in
Mm-hmm.
fact, even more powerless, where all it possibly can do is complain, yell, hold investigations that go nowhere. And in the meantime, as in any sort of parliamentary democracy, if the Prime Minister holds a substantial majority, usually in Britain of at least 100 seats, but in the U.S. Senate 6 seats are more than adequate, then he becomes Prime Minister and rules exactly as he wants without any kind of restraint from the legislative body. That's what's happening right now, and Trump is acting more as a Prime Minister, unconstrained by anyone, than a president who should be constrained by checks and balances. Hence, Prime Minister Trump.
That's very interesting because one of my own takes, with a lot less mental power than you have, is that that our Republican form of government is under attack. I had not thought of the evolution towards a parliamentary style of democracy. But now, having said that, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't think that more than 60. I don't think that 30 or 40% of Americans know the difference between a republic and a direct democracy or a parliamentary democracy. What say you? Am I overstating it?
You're probably understating it. I mean, the paucity of civic education in this country is unbelievable. I mean, it's good to focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but people don't know anything about basic government, nor do they know about history. And I think this is one of the great flaws of our educational system, that we're illiterate when it comes to the basic politics of how we are governed and what our destiny is. But I go a step further, because if Trump wins in 2020, and right now he is on a course to do that, no matter who the Democrats run. And in many ways, the Democratic Party almost make the Labor Party in Britain look like a well-oiled machine because they are so divided. They have too many Jeremy Corbyns,
yes.
quite frankly,
yes.
and even a rational, able politician like Nancy Pelosi, and many people will disagree, but I think
she is. Yes.
a good politician, whether you agree with her policies or not. While there's no equivalent at the Labor Party so far, it won't make any difference because the Democrats are now in the process, it seems to me, in terms of the presidential race, voting themselves into irrelevance. We'll see how Bloomberg does, and whether a 77-year-old Jewish billionaire who is not well-liked by the black community, who comes in at the last minute, can make a difference. I hope he can, because the only other candidate that I see would be viable is Joe Biden, and I'm afraid that the whole Burisma Hunter Biden fiasco has killed him politically. But if the Democrats are to nominate somebody like a Bernie Sanders, that will make George McGovern's defeat in 1972 almost look like a victory.
Oh my goodness, yes, it will. But you're bringing up so many important things. When you brought up Winston Churchill, it reminded me something when I was studying my own political science and my own background. The best government for a short term is a benevolent despot, but you have it only so long as you have the benevolent, wise Marcus Aurelius, But that's why we have institutions in this country. And now the only reason I bring this up is my biggest fear, and I see it on both sides from the callers and from the stories we cover, is that both sides now seem totally committed to the ends justify the means. And their followers feel the same way as long as they get what they want. For example, a lot of Trump supporters don't understand that he may be giving them things that they want, and for example, they'll call me up and say, "Results, Bob, results." And my naive statement is, in this country, it's less about the results than the process. But I am screaming to deaf ears.
It's a zero-sum game. One of the big differences between the British system is the civil service in Britain, which is really relevant. That is a professional corps which has been an anchor to windward for hundreds of years. And it is not only a revered institution, but it has had necessary checks on the government.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, your point about being a benevolent despot, Churchill was only good until 1945 when he was voted out of
and
office.
And then they tossed him out.
Even though he came back again. Mm-hmm. And Maggie Thatcher, who was, I think, 12 years as prime minister, ultimately the civil service enabled John Major to launch a coup in 1990 to displace Maggie when it became clear she was not working. So there were inherent checks and balances. Unfortunately, we do not have a civil service to that degree in this particular country. In some cases, it's been unionized. It's been divided very much up in the various branches of government. So you have defense civil servants and foreign. You have State Department civil servants, so forth and so on. And because they have not been unified, I don't mean unionized, I mean unified as in the British case, and because they don't have the same history, it seems to me that they're far less effective. There's a big difference here. I also note that Churchill weaponized words and sent them off to war. Donald Trump's rhetoric is as far from Winston Churchill's as Pluto is from Earth. But among his base, it's a siren song.
Yes.
And so, for example, because of tax cuts and regulatory cuts, the economy seems to be doing just fine.
Yes.
And from headlines, people will understand that. We have a $23 trillion debt and $1 trillion a year deficit. Now, you people who are 30 and under, Social Security is gone. Health care is gone, or will be when you get to be our age if you live that long. People do not want to recognize the long-term danger when they're dealing with short-term realities. And so in many ways, Donald Trump and Democrats before him have put in place a ticking political nuclear time bomb called debt and deficit. And we have no recourse. So at some stage, when interest rates go up, and they will, the economy begins to slow down. You see that happening in Japan already in recession. What the ultimate consequences of the coronavirus will be if it continues to spread could be a worldwide recession. But this is cancer, a fiscal, financial cancer that Trump is readily augmenting. And until or unless people realize this, we are more than mortgaging. We are jeopardizing our futures as well as the future of children and grandchildren.
Those are real present dangers. 741, Harlan Ullman, our guest. I just want to go back to something that you were talking before about these civil servants. Well, we have allowed, and then there are some actors within it that do raise questions. We have allowed one political group, the far right, to call our civil servants in general the deep state and make them to be this malevolent, dark thing. How do we fix that?
We don't. And it's not the civil service. What they're really saying is that these are democratic institutions and Democrats who are the deep state with their followers. They're not talking about civil servants. They're talking about how the Democrats have contaminated the deep state or formed the deep state in this form of conspiracy. And to a lot of people who realize that government does not work, it's far more convenient to blame the other side or the enemy than it is to accept any degree of responsibility.
On either side. For
Correct.
example, there are those, in fact, I'm getting texts now, but there are people of goodwill who feel that such people as Comey, Clapper, Brennan have not acted honorably. Do you know any of these individuals? I mean, Comey was a Republican. I mean, clearly he may have made some mistakes, but...
Comey was a jerk.
Okay.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. This is bad taste. This was stupidity on his point. I do not say that about John Brennan. John Brennan, former director of the CIA, was a fine servant of the loyal American during his time. After he left, of course, he became more outspoken, and once you become outspoken, you get into the line of fire. Mm-hmm. But I don't think Comey performed particularly well, but I don't see that these people are members of the so-called deep state, unfortunately. They've become politicized, and if you're not with me, you're against me.
This is just such a huge problem. Where do you see us headed?
In grave, grave, grave trouble. As long as we maintain the fiction or the temporary reality of an economy that can grow at least 2%, then I make this point frequently. We're akin to somebody who just jumped off the Empire State Building and we're cruising past floor 88, and people saying, "How's it going?" So far, so good. But there will be a time when we're no longer cruising past floor 88, and that's where I think we are right now. Now, what's interesting, I just read a book called 1 Year of War about the Hagel brothers. Chuck Hagel, former sergeant, senator, and Secretary of Defense, and his younger brother Tom, who spent 1968-69 in Vietnam. And what's fascinating about the book, aside from the commentary on small unit tactics and combat, which is as real that you can actually smell it and see the green VC tracer rounds, talks about looking backwards as if it's an upside-down triangle from the Hagel brothers back to America. And we forget the riots that were taking place in 67, 68, 69. Even in Omaha, Nebraska, where the Hagels came from, when George Wallace visited North Omaha in 1968, it started a series of racial riots, which, for the size of the community, were as bad as those in Watts in 65 and in Chicago in 68. And it showed how much turmoil the United States was in with the assassinations of Bobby Kennedy and then Martin Luther King, the amount of violence, racial unrest, so forth that took place. And in a different sense, America is in a position that is akin in many ways in terms of these disruptive functions, but without the violence. And at some stage, if there is violence, and this could make that period of 67 to 69 reappear. And that's what really worries me, because I think we have all the potential ingredients for societal anger being unleashed in significant ways, as much as we did in the late 1960s. But fortunately, for the time being, the spark has not yet been lit. That spark could come in 2020. It could come if Donald Trump decides that, if Donald Trump wins, what happens in 2024 if Trump is elected? Does Trump say, okay, I want to continue in office, but here's what I'm going to do? The obvious replacement for me is Ivanka. She's a woman,
good grief.
She's pretty, she's Jewish, she's had all this experience, and I will run as vice president. And by the way, that is not against the Constitution. All it means is that if Ivanka dies or is incapacitated,
that's
the
like
Speaker of the House
That's like Putin and Medvedev, for God's sakes. Oh, my goodness.
And from Trump's perspective, that's something that I think is not out of the question.
You're scaring me, Harlan Ullman.
You asked me what I'm looking towards.
No, I know.
If you were in Donald Trump's position and the universe does not explode, give me a more rational way out.
If I were in Donald Trump's position, or I worked for Donald Trump, I would read to him many of the editorials that were written the other day about George Washington, who decided not to pursue another term, who didn't want the president to be a monarchy, or for that matter, to be a prime minister, and to do, if he was elected to another term, that is our system. That's all well and good. Now, what I find paradoxical in my own little hypocrisy, a guy I like jury-rigged New York City to get a third term, so he can't complain about it, that's for sure. And that would be Michael Bloomberg. So I'm dumbfounded by that possibility. Hey, I want to take you down another avenue.
Sure.
And it's something, you know, a lot of people do listen to you, and I get emails and phone calls, and they've always asked me to ask you about these things. And I have a couple of minutes here, and I'd like to. When we see something like, and I'm not asking you to be a conspiracy theorist in any way, but speaking of assassinations, why is it that we have to wait another 25 years or whatever it is to see all of the records emanating from the Kennedy assassination?
Because the Warren Commission was a farce.
Continue.
That's simple. And people, I think, Lyndon Johnson, who I suspect was the one who put the time limit on this, understood that, and he wanted sufficient time so that the memory of the Kennedy administration would be far, far, far gone. My own theory is that Kennedy was shot and killed accidentally by one of his Secret Service officers.
Really?
Who were with him, turned around, you bet, turned around and unloaded his M16 into Kennedy, and that was covered up.
Wow. You know, for a guy with your access to information, that is spooky. I mean, I've read
No,
some...
it's not my access to information. The fact was that there's no way physically that Lee Harvey Oswald with a Mannlicher Carbano rifle could have gotten those hits. There were, I think, 20 marksmen who were all given the same situation, the same weather, the same conditions, the same distances, the same movement of the Lincoln convertible. Not one got a hit. Not one bullet hit out of 20 marksmen firing 4 shots each.
Now, what about the shot in his throat? What about the shot from...
That's where I think it came from, the M16. I think what happened was there was a Secret Serviceman. If you take a look at the movies, turned around, panicked, and accidentally floated around. I mean, I think this was an accident.
All 3 shots?
I don't know that he was shot 3 times. It was a bullet that did several things.
No, but there were the sound recordings. There were 3 shots.
Well, I understand. But you remember, the bullets disappeared.
Yes, one of them did. We know one of the bullets disappeared, or well, maybe 2 of them.
You had were pieces of bullets which could not be identified as actual bullets. They were pieces that came from a bullet, but they couldn't define the caliber. And so this is all hypothesis.
Of course.
It's all nonsense. But it could be that a .556 round that was not destroyed was taken by the Secret Service or whomever. I'm not saying it was the Secret Service who did the cover-up. There are lots of other people. But can you imagine the press if this has really happened? The president was shot by an accident. So it was far more convenient to blame Lee Harvey Oswald.
Now, obviously, he was up in the school book depository with that rifle.
Yeah, he fired. There's no doubt. Sure.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm getting at. So you don't think there was any other conspiracy beyond that, then, since we have gone down that rabbit hole?
Well, I don't know. This guy was a kook. He could have been manipulated. The fact, if you look at the actual number of people who had some kind of role as witnesses or so forth, I think 99% of them died within 6 months or something like that.
I've read that.
It's true. It's true, which raises all sorts of issues. And the question is, who would have picked out Lee Harvey Oswald? Was it the mafia who were trying to get back at Kennedy? Was it some right-wing group that was fearful that Kennedy was going to negotiate away the store? They were afraid of what he was going to do with Russia. Who knows? Those things were never proven. But the Warren Commission was a cover-up, and anybody who reads it closely would understand that for reasons that suggest that the real reason was so acrimonious or so incendiary or so explosive that it's best left to be confined for 25 more years to a safe until it can be released.
We have a president now who, in some ways, refreshingly, is unable to talk about what he thinks or believes, yet he was perfectly fine with putting this stuff away for another 25 years as well. Why? Why would even he go along with this? He could get there's all kinds of street cred he could get by coming forward with this information.
Not really. I just think that this is, what was done was done. It should never have been put away for that length of period. But I think the reasons are that the subject matter would have been so incendiary that people thought it would be better to delay that as much as possible.
Wow. Okay, let me give you 2 more since we've gone down this path. Bobby Kennedy. I honestly believed everything straight up. Sirhan did what he did. He's still in jail. He's still alive.
Yeah.
And now the real one that makes you scratch your head in many ways, well, certainly Kennedy does, but is Martin Luther King.
Oh, no, this, I think that whatever his name was, James Earl Ray. Mm-hmm. No, this was somebody who had huge hatred, and I think there were lots of people who would have done that.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty pat obvious. I think that the second Kennedy assassination and Martin Luther King, you got a lot of nuts that were prepared to do that, and it's amazing that there haven't been more assassinations, given the hatred that abounds and the easy access to weapons and explosives that persist in this country.
Speaking of, how much do you think, because I've always been willing to take the risk, that old, I don't know if it was Jefferson or whomever, and the whole dynamic of guns and butter, how much are we a victim because we're a free country, and are we really prepared to accept the risk? For example, I've always thought that we became we were intimidated by 9/11. As much as we brandished our toughness, Americans were afraid to get on the subway, afraid to get in office buildings. In many ways, I thought, from the standpoint of the people that brought us 9/11, I thought they succeeded to some extent. Is that an unfounded view?
What's your point here?
My point is that we were intimidated by it, and it did affect us in a way. We weren't as brave as we say we are. That's my point.
Well, do you remember, I forget how many years ago, the Beltway sniper?
Yes.
Two guys who killed a number of people and really panicked. And I think that's true. I think a lot of people are really worried by the coronavirus simply because it's unpredictable, it's uncertain, and it's invisible. The same thing was true with SARS and H1N1.
Mm-hmm.
A bird flew when it came. And so there are certain incidents, unlike, for example, the attack on Pearl Harbor, which was an outright attack, and that really, really riled up America and got us into World War II in a very serious way. And so I think that there's a big difference between a 9/11 from an invisible sort of enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew who Al-Qaeda was, at least most Americans did not, as opposed to an outright attack by an enemy military.
Well, yes, but my point with the Al-Qaeda attack is that, with the exception of the Civil War, Americans of those generations of starting in 1900, after the Spanish-American War, although they didn't attack us either, we don't know what it's like to be attacked. I mean, imagine if we were Israel. I mean, we wouldn't go out at night. That was the feeling that I got. I was disappointed.
I think, my guess is, Bob, that we had been continuously at war since Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there have been stages, obviously, in the 80s, not. But we had the 91 war, so forth. And I think that people were just not... People were in a sense that we were really secure. The Cold War was over. The threat of nuclear attack was de minimis. And I think that 9/11 was so outrageous and such, it was really an extension of shock and awe in which it really grabbed people emotionally. And the issue here was the surprise, which became the shock, and the awe, which lasted, was these guys could do it again.
Yes.
And we are really not prepared. And by the way, any preparations we take to make us more secure are going to erode our civil rights and our freedoms. And that's one of the unfortunately great leverages that Osama bin Laden had, was that he was using democracy against us, and I've written several books. The greatest weakness we have is that if we are subject to attack, then do we really have to forego on so many of our civil liberties as to disrupt the nature of government in terms of national security. And that's a grave, grave weakness we happen to have of this particular system, of any democracy. And it's something that groups can exploit. They haven't exploited as well as they might, but that's what I think Putin is doing in his own strange way, and to a lesser degree and in other directions the Chinese are exploiting the weaknesses in our basic democracy to their own advantage. And from their perspective, that's quite bright. And, of course, we don't do the same in reverse.
From their perspective, because my point, and the final nail in my point is that when you embrace the kind of democracy we have, it requires a certain amount of courage to live with more risk than, say, someone who lives in a closed society. And I was just surprised we weren't more brave after 9/11. I mean, I once, when I was doing a show, I said, if a plane went into a building once a week in every city in the United States, I'm sure an actuary could come up with the odds of the average American being struck by it, and it's like 1 in 10 million. And yet we were timid, and it bothers me. All right, I got just a couple of other questions. You mentioned it, and it was on my laundry list before you go. Do you work with pandemics, epidemics in your national security work?
No.
Okay. Who's in charge of that?
Well, the Center, it's a very complicated business. The Center of Disease Control, the National Institute for Health. You have a technical side under Homeland Security. You have a medical side. And I think that we are as prepared as best we can, because there are all sorts of pandemics that could take place. Smallpox is probably one of the most dangerous, bubonic plague, things like that. But unless or until you get to that particular stage, your best is never going to be good enough if something really strikes massively. And it's simply because there just aren't enough resources and you can't prepare for everything. But I think that while there are certain weaknesses, I think we've done a fairly good job in dealing realistically with what needs to be done, understanding that you can never have full-time protection against the whole range of potential pandemics.
Before you go, your column today and then the one you're working on for next week, tell people where to get it and what they're about.
Well, it's UPI. The one this week is The Stupid Gene, and I argue that given the mismanagement and the huge mistakes that Republicans and Democrats have made in this country at home and abroad since the end of World War II, principally abroad in terms of wars we've lost that were stupid, or I should say the only explanation that I have is that we made these decisions which turn out to be more than just a lack of knowledge and understanding. They turn out to be stupid. And it's difficult to define stupidity. Is it an absence of knowledge or IQ? Is it a question of cognitive dissonance where you're willfully doing things that you know are dangerous, such as smoking? Or is it some other factor? But when you take a look and wonder, how do we get into Vietnam, or how do we get a $23 trillion deficit, or how do we do the many things that we're doing, one of the explanations is, and this applies obviously beyond the United States, stupid. The column for next week will be Prime Minister Donald Trump. We've discussed some of these particular issues, but what Trump has done, in my mind, is turn the current Republican division of power that we've had between three branches into a constitutional parliamentary system in which he's become prime minister, aided and abetted by a Senate, which enables him to do the things he wants, and the House of Representatives has descended into a House of Very Commons in which it's irrelevant today.
Well, once again, I want to thank you. We've learned a lot, as we always do. Harlan Ullman, we'll talk to you again next week. Folks, go to UPI. Check out those columns. Lots of wisdom and interest. Thank you so very much. We're going to take a break, folks. We will be back with Jake Schaefer in just a few minutes. Stay there. He's back. Jake Schaefer's back in the house. He's been reporting in each day, but he is here in person, and he tried to avoid our camera. But there's no way to avoid the camera, Jake. Squint your eyes. There's the handsome man now. His family wants to see him. Those poor souls that created him. He's got his sunglasses on. Before we get to Jake again, he's going to hold me accountable. We're going to talk some sports. We've set some time aside to do that. He's also going to hold me accountable from the standpoint of my hockey picks. Let's take another look at the weather. Well, the weather's up to 41. The temperature is, we have sunny skies, and we've got a 3-day stretch that's going to get a little colder. Mostly sunny again, highs today around 43, but a wind out of the northwest will make it feel like 30. Tonight, clear and cold with lows around 22. Thursday, partly sunny and a little breezy. The wind out of the northwest, 15 miles an hour. Wind chills will mainly be in the 20s throughout the day. And tomorrow the highs will be 34. The weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. The top of the hour is brought to you by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Bainey & Kahn and Plug-in Virtual Reality. And this segment coming up is brought to you by Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo, Fuente, Patrons, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located on Boston Post Road in Larchmont. They're open 7 days. Aaron Judge is upset. Other ball players are saying that these people need a beatdown. There's something strange going on, folks, in baseball. Where were all these complaining athletes when PEDs were at the heart of the scandals in baseball? With us to talk about that, but first, likely to hold me accountable for some new hockey picks, is none other than our own Jake Schaefer. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning, Bob.
How are you?
I'm well.
I get nervous when I see you looking at the books. Are you ready to hold me accountable, sir?
Yes, I got some picks for last night's game from your nemesis, so let's just see how he did. First of all, who are the Habs? Hey.
The Habs is a short term for Les Habitants, the Canadians, the inhabitants of Montreal.
Okay, so he picked all the games last night. I don't think he's aware it's a morning show, so I got the picks that are in the afternoon. But we'll maybe we should give him a call this morning and wake him up and get his picks for tonight's games. But he went 5-2 with his picks yesterday, so he's off to a.
Okay, I'll make an honest account. Tell me, go game by game, and I'll give you honestly who I would have picked.
Philadelphia against
Philadelphia against Columbus.
Yes.
I would have picked Philly, but I'm a Columbus fan, so
you were both correct.
Yeah.
The Penguins in Toronto.
I would have picked the Penguins. That's an easy game. Toronto can't find their butts with both hands. In fact, I predict that they will get rid of their interim coach and they will hire. This is a prediction you could write down. There is a perfect coach out there for them who is available. And he is the previous coach of the Minnesota Wild. He just got fired the other day. And he's a terrific coach. He was with Washington. And Bruce Boudreau. He's a perfect coach for them. He played for their great junior team, won a Memorial Cup, played for Montreal, but is coach now. Get this. This guy has coached for almost 40 years and won championships in every league but the NHL, but he's never, literally. Folks, go to your Wikipedia right now. Never had a losing record in the East Coast League, in the American League, in the National Hockey League. And not just wins, but wins big. But the interesting thing is, he's not the Tortorella type who can take a bunch of warriors and make them credible. He is one of those rare coaches who can coach stars. Okay, and Toronto has a lot of stars who can't get out of their own way. So that's my
Phil
prediction.
Jackson-esque.
Right. So who else you got?
Ottawa, Buffalo.
Oh my God, I would have went with Buffalo, but who won?
You were on the same wavelength for 3. That would have been your first loss.
Okay.
New Jersey against the Blues.
You got to go with the Blues. That's easy. Again, last night was an easy scad.
You guys are in lockstep. The Canes versus Nashville.
Boy, that's tough. I might have went with the Canes, actually, but I think they lost. I think I lost that bet.
Nope, they won,
They did win?
he
Yeah.
picked that as well.
Nashville's not been playing well lately.
L.A. and the Jets.
You got to go with the Jets unless you're living on another planet.
You both had that. And
Go ahead.
the Red Wings and the Canadiens.
Got to go with the Habs. Even though
You
I
guys
grew up-
would have had the exact same
Yeah,
picks.
the last night was easy. All right, but let's call me. You can call them up if you want. And tell him to call the 914 number, the 999-4006 if he wants to come on, because then we can compare notes tomorrow. We were in our sports segment. We're going to talk a lot of this stuff right now with Jake Schaefer, but as he gets ready to call me accountable for tomorrow, let's get my picks on record first. We remind you that shortly we will be talking about the gambling scandal, the XFL, and also something that Jake said, his own I told you so, rumors about Tom Brady either staying with the Patriots or going out to L.A. abound. But one of the biggest things I heard yesterday, Jake, is that they don't think that the coach of New England wants Brady back.
Interesting. I know that a lot of people think they're looking to get a quarterback in the draft. They're picking 22nd, I believe, and there's very deep quarterback draft. There's 6 quarterbacks that could go in the first round, 2 in the top 5 picks, 3 maybe in the top 5 picks.
And what they're saying apropos of that is that Mr. Brady's not what he was, and that it was noticeable in some of the games. Most notably, one loss they took, I think it was from the Dolphins. They got their butts kicked, and that should not have happened. But then again, I mean, the guy wins 15 games.
He didn't get his first round bye for the first time in what was it, 9 years, 12 years?
But my God, that's expecting an awful lot. Okay. So it's time, folks, to hold Marrone accountable the way we used to hold Jake accountable. What games are on the board tonight, Jake? I'm ready to go.
Well, the Blackhawks are at home against the Rangers.
Oh, God. Do I go with yeah, I got to go. I think the Rangers should. No. No. You know what? I'm going to go with the Hawks. I'll be rooting for the Rangers. I'll tell you why I'm going to go with the Hawks. Because the Rangers' problem is on the back line. And same as Chicago's aging defense. But I think that unless they got a better goalie, and unless the Ranger goalie comes up big, they're going to lose, even though the Rangers are a better team.
The Hawks are favored.
Okay. What else?
Avalanche are at home against the Islanders.
Ooh, Avalanche.
They are favored as well.
Yeah.
Bruins on the road against the Oilers.
You got to go with the Bruins anytime
Bruins,
they play
big
these
favorites.
days. Yeah. I'm sorry to go with all favorites here, but
Stars at home against the Coyotes.
I'm going to go with the Dogs.
Coyotes.
Yeah.
Panthers on the road against the Ducks.
Oh, Panthers.
Slight favorite there.
Yeah.
Canucks at home against the Wild.
Well, that's a good game. Got to go with the Canucks. The Wild are playing horribly since they got rid of my coach. So let's see what your boy has to say. Now, what's this fella's name as we try and get him on
Nick
there?
from Ohio State.
Nick from Ohio State. Did you text him? Did you call him?
I texted him.
Okay,
I'm
let's
sure
see.
he's still asleep, though. I think he's on vacation, actually.
How
I think
dare
everyone's on
these
vacation.
people sleep? All right, let's go into other stuff. Aaron Judge was whining yesterday along with everyone else, and there's a ball player by the name of Bellinger who says that these guys should get a beating. Now, why do you think that we didn't hear this kind of vitriol over the PED scandal, the PED scandal?
Because everyone was probably doing it.
That's my guess, yeah. But I
Or
would have
knew someone that was doing it and was aided by someone that was doing it.
But my assumption was, and perhaps it was incorrect, and many had the same assumption, that probably a lot of cheating goes on vis-a-vis sign stealing.
Of course.
So why are these guys moaning now? Because they were on the wrong end of it? Is it about whose ox is being gored?
Maybe because the Astros were just so good at it.
Yeah,
And it's really interesting to see what will happen to the whistleblower. You know, the commissioner had known about this for years. He'd had complaints about the Astros and many other teams. So he knows he has complaints about many other teams doing the same thing. But he couldn't do anything until a player came out and outed his former team and explained in detail what exactly.
Wait a minute. But if he had knowledge of it, if he's a good chief executive, okay, you have to launch an investigation. He should have
Based
done
on
that.
what?
Based
Do you
on
think
what
the players' union
well,
would allow
I'm
that?
going back to you. What he knew.
Just
If he had
what
reason
kind of
to
tips were
believe,
they? What kind of credibility
it
did they
almost
have?
doesn't matter. You're the boss. You know.
He does. He won't. He's too afraid of the players' union. He needed a player to come out and give the interview that he gave, give the details that he gave, and so it went from there.
Now, where do you think we're headed? Do you think this is going to die down anytime soon? Every day I think it's going to die down. There's another front page, Aaron Judge moaning now. And I always got to remember myself that we're not dealing with rocket scientists with these ball
Vegas
players.
has set the line that the Astros are going to get hit by a pitch. The over-under is 83.5. So they're going to get hit by a pitch.
Do you
According
really
to Las
think so?
Vegas, 83.5 times this year. So what does that mean? Because there's 162 games. Half of them are on the road. What is it? 162 divided by 2, 81? So are they going to get hit every game on the road? Are they not going to hit them at home? It'll be interesting.
Oh, I
to
think
see.
that if there's any questionable pitch, I think they're going to have to suspend people just to keep things squared away. And it's a shame. Altuve's a great ball player. It's a shame he's been besmirched like this. And
He
there's
hasn't
nothing
shown
he can
his hideous tattoo yet, has he?
No, I don't think we're ever going to see his tattoo. So we shall see.
Now, would he, to cover himself, would he actually go out and
could you up the mic just a little?
Would he actually go out and get a hideous tattoo just to say, hey, look, see?
Oh, if
That's
I
why
were
didn't
him,
want
I
my
would.
jersey ripped.
But see, I don't understand why, since it's out there, they should just all admit it and end it and move on and say we shouldn't have done it. And that we have nothing more that we can say we shouldn't have done it. I still don't know why they haven't done that. You know, they're acting like politicians who wouldn't admit a murder that they committed on national TV. I guess that's the PR way their PR people are counseling them.
Yeah, they have not done a good job, the players, of contrition at all, I would say, so far this spring. But it's not actually spring yet, but spring training.
All right, well, let's move on to football. A lot of time spent yesterday because a lot of these football teams have to get their rosters in order soon. July
And
comes
Drew
up.
Brees announced he's coming back.
Yeah, at the age of 40. Is he still that good? I got to
He's-
take a contact lens out. You people aren't going to like this.
He's
I'm irritated.
definitely in the upper tier. That's disgusting, Bob.
Oh, it's not. This gets a little contact lens. I shouldn't have left it in. But that's how I roll. I broke my glasses, and but there's the other one.
Yes, I would say Drew Brees is a top 10 NFL quarterback still at the age of 40.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't
But
know
so
if
is
he's
Tom
better
Brady.
than Tom Brady.
Well, that's my point. I mean, I don't understand why people are throwing Brady under the bus. He's not what he was. You won 15 ball games, and you all of a sudden are yesterday's news. I mean, I don't like the Patriots. I don't like talk about cheating. They've made it an art form, and so did Tom Brady.
Well, they've got a punishment coming too.
Well, what Tom Brady did, or because again, I do admire him. He's just such a great player. Is when he destroyed his phone. All I had to know about that particular case, had that been a court of law, there's a point. You ever been on a jury?
Never.
When the judge says before he sends you into or she sends you into the back room to debate, you're allowed to use your common sense about what you've heard today. And if a judge said that to the jury when Tom Brady did what he did, he would have been found guilty of obstruction. And although what I did find, and I was very upset with it, that became a conservative liberal issue. Were you aware of this? Almost there was a tint of racism in that. A lot of people were upset because he was being attacked and he was white. Very interesting. Very interesting back then. At least here in New York, when you went on Facebook, that was the mentality, that he shouldn't be attacked. But at any rate, okay.
It should be a fascinating offseason in the NFL. So many quarterbacks are going to have new homes. Brady could go where Rivers was. Where is Rivers going to end up? Where is Brees' backup, who played well when Brees was hurt last year? Where's he going to go? There's going to be 5 or 6 new rookies coming in that are going to have the chance to start.
Now, speaking of backups, do you think at all the Patriots are upset that they gave up on Garoppolo?
Yes, I would.
Because he would.
I would assume so.
Because you do have to groom a second guy. I mean, even going back to the Green Bay Packers, they had Aaron Rodgers getting ready when Brett Favre left.
Yeah, he sat behind Favre for 3 or 4 seasons.
A couple of years, and the thing is, that was probably maybe he probably sat too long.
Yes, and
but
he forced Favre out.
Yeah, and again, Favre had a couple of decent seasons after that, but essentially he was where maybe Brady is now. Well, any other football issues you want to talk about? I know yesterday you were rightfully raving about the XFL. Everybody who watches it loves it.
The ratings went up. I could not believe that there was a 10% ratings spike from week 1 to week 2. Because I remember when the XFL first came out, and was it 2001, I believe, it had huge numbers the first week, but the second week, nothing. You could tell it was all over week 2. So I'll watch this weekend. I see the spreads for the game. I couldn't even tell you heads from tails with the point spreads.
Tell me about your new hat.
It's a Syracuse Sky Chiefs hat.
Oh, that's the Sky Chiefs. I thought that was a gas station.
No.
Sky Chiefs.
It does kind of look like that one station.
It does, doesn't it? I'm looking. You look good up there on TV. Look at him sipping coffee. And what else is on your mind this morning in the world of sports?
Well, are you going to watch the debates tonight?
You know what? I may finally watch a little bit of the debate since you want to talk about politics.
Bloomberg's in, right?
Yeah. But you know, if I may, I was doing a Rush Limbaugh earlier. And what I mean by Rush, one of the things that Rush always did, and I'm talking about even early in his career before he went all the way to the right, he would, and again, his tongue was in his cheek, but he says, "I told you so, folks." Well, I was on the, if I may, I was on the Bloomberg bandwagon when I was the only guy driving it many, many months ago.
Very solid poll for Bernie came out today, though. He's going to win the next two at least. So
he's not going to get the nomination, though, because the country's not going to vote for a socialist. It's just not going to happen. And the Democratic Party's going to have to figure a way to get Bernie out of the way. Now, one of the things, I think Bernie's Jewish, too. They keep talking about Michael Bloomberg being Jewish. I think Bernie Sanders is Jewish also. So
I believe so.
Hopefully that gets rid of that. I just like, and the thing that bothers me the most about that, and you know my background, and it involves Michael Bloomberg, there are things I don't like about him, but do you know he built that company out of a severance package? I don't know if you're aware of that.
I did not know that.
He left a firm called Solomon Brothers, a great bond house, and he had this real combat with the traders. You'd have to understand what the traders are. They're like the acid in your stomach. Unless traders are greedy, vicious, selfish, with huge appetites for making money, gambling, women, cards, you name it. In fact, one of the great brokerage for I forget their name. Maybe it was Sally Liar's Poker. Anyway, Michael knew what they needed on the trading desks, and they were always fighting him. They wanted this. He said, "You need this, guys. You don't need what you're asking for. I can give you a lot of what you're asking for, but not exactly the way you want it. Let me do this for you." And they said, "No, get out of here." So they wrote him a check for $10 million because he was in charge of technology at the time. And he went to Merrill Lynch, and he said, "Look, Merrill, I have this idea." And you have to understand, for those of you who aren't Wall Streeters, I'm going to use the example of, imagine if every real estate agent in the country had a screen with the exact same prices on it for different properties. And at the time, it was unheard of. The bond market was like the over-the-counter market. It was on chalkboards. So what you saw, a trader would have a desk with like 100 phone lines. So I'd have to call you and say, "What are you selling this for?" And I'd have to call this guy, "What are you selling this for?" And we'd horse trade. So what he did is he created, first of all, he had to get the data. So he had to get quants and analysts to put together the proper prices. Then he had to have algorithms put together on top of, through those people that would compare prices from firm to firm to firm. He had to get all those firms to buy in. Then he had to build a piece of technology that did it. So what he did, he went to Merrill and he said, "Look, I'm really making this thumbnail." He said, "I'll give you a third of the company, Merrill, if you let me work on your bond desk and develop this app." Now, when he developed it, and this goes back, and if you read, it's in his book, he said, "I'm going to give them what they need and some of the things they ask for." Well, they had email before it was fashionable. Bloomberg, you bought his terminal. No, you couldn't just get a screen. You got a box. You got a screen with a keyboard that was color-coded with different things on it. You had email. You can talk to anyone who bought the terminal. You had the price of every bond on the market that was reasonable by product fixed. You had the corporates and fixing, and of course it was a lot harder later for municipal bonds, but he did that as well. And so he created this business that had that. You actually had more sports on the Bloomberg terminal than you see on your screens today. And the reason he did that, he looked at the things that traders love. They love sports, they love gambling, and so he created this box. And this is 30 years ago now. Maybe it's 20 now. I'm going to go back 20. It was $900 a month to have that box on your desk. It actually became a status symbol. If you were on Wall Street and didn't have a Bloomberg terminal, and some people before that had something called a Quotron, you didn't have a Bloomberg terminal, you weren't worth having a meeting with. That's how important they became. So what he did is he took this entire market, the fixed income market, not only automated it, he created from that the data points themselves. In other words, the price of a specific bond, you can sell that. You have a brokerage firm, you need that price. Well, if you wanted the price of that bond and you didn't have a Bloomberg terminal, you had to use your telephone and call the trader. And you had to do the comparisons on your own. So anyone who traded fixed income, you had to have it. It's like in that famous movie, with the DiCaprio, the recent one about Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah. Oh, you don't have a pen, you need it? Well, you wanted a fixed income price. Now, later on, in fact, I'm willing to say that I was the first person who got to negotiate buying the data out of the box from their own systems. That's when I got to know them even better. But my point being, he did this. But an interesting thing happened. You're probably wondering why Bloomberg News exists. Well, there's the corollary company is a company called Reuters. For 150 years, they've been a news company. Well, what happens is, and again, I was a communications guy by this point, is when you're looking into companies in a specific region or in a specific municipality, what else is involved when you're dealing with finances in those municipalities? Politics, news, current events, weather. For example, the price of commodities is going to go down in Florida if there's a freeze. If you have arid weather out west, it's going to affect crops there. If you have a takeover in a foreign country, it's going to affect the price of things. If Chrysler's doing well, it's going to affect jobs. My point is that Bloomberg discovered along the way when he was building all this information about companies and then governments and then municipalities, that it was, if it takes 5 steps to do news, he already had 4 steps done. So now they became a news outlet. Because what you find is when you're doing these stories about different municipalities or different companies, you're really doing stories about the local economy and about the local politics. So he expanded into news. Reuters did it the other way. They were in news, and then they said, hey, we have all of these corporate chieftains, we have all of this information, why don't we get into the data business? So Reuters became the best provider of equity data, that's stocks, and Bloomberg bonds. I mean, there are other smaller players and municipal players, but anyway, he did this, and this is the difference between him and Trump and some of the other people. He didn't inherit his money. He built it that way. So what's your reaction to that? Did you know he did all that by himself?
I did not. And now I'm ready to write a term paper about the man.
No, you could. I'm sorry to go on and on, but it's he really did do all these things, and it was really genius. Now, to be fair-minded, dealing with some of his people and the cult of personality was always a chore. Let me tell you. And what you also learn, corporate chieftains, and this is something that Donald Trump gets. They are very sensitive, as more powerful as they are, to icons. So that even the chairman of Merrill, which was the #1 brokerage firm at the time, didn't want to get a call from Michael Bloomberg complaining. Because after Michael Bloomberg, my God. So that you'd be in a negotiation with them. And what do you think was there when they didn't like the way the negotiation was going, Bloomberg people? What do you think they would pull out as their trump card?
What's that?
We'll call Michael. And they knew that we knew that our bosses would quake. And it was always a problem. Anyway, I used to say back in the day that when I deal with Mike's people, I needed a shower. So he's got his own cult of personality. Anyway, I'm sorry, but you asked about tonight. But I'm a big Bloomberg fan because one of the things I did learn is that he's a very serious man. He's very measured. He has morals. He has scruples, and he understands democracy. What else you got?
I believe you're wrong about Bobby Kennedy. I think that's the most obvious cover-up and conspiracy.
Okay, well then that's okay. Say more about that.
Well, I think the scientific evidence shows that he was shot at close range, probably from behind his ear. Mm-hmm. Saran was, I think, 6-7 feet away from him. All the bullets that were found, Saran's gun could only hold 8. I think they counted at least 9 in people. There were 2 in the ceiling, 2 in the doors. I have always thought that it was CIA mind control. Saran was in a deep state of hypnosis that he'll never awake from. And I believe the man guarding Bobby Kennedy was the actual assassin who was leading him through the back of the cafeteria.
Okay, what about people? There were individuals, one of them a great football player whose
Rosie Greer.
Rosie Greer, who grabbed Sirhan. Mm-hmm. And they say they saw him shoot the gun.
I believe it was a cap gun. No bullets.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So you think he was a patsy?
Yes.
See, that's interesting. I listened to all these theories because the fact that both Kennedys died. Now, what about John Kennedy? I honestly don't buy Harlan's I respect him
What
greatly.
he said something about a Secret Serviceman's gun went off or
Yeah,
something?
and
Jeez.
accidentally killed him.
That's silly.
That was a stretch. But again, and this guy's wired to so many people. That's why that comes as a shock. See, I've got one of the shelves I have has about 11 books on the assassination, and there are so many common denominators, such as the links to the mob, the links to the CIA, the links to Cuba. Something's rotten in Denmark there. And again, and that's why I started that discussion with him. I didn't start with, are you a conspiracy theorist? I started with, why won't they publish the record 60 years later?
I think it's obvious that there was a cover-up, conspiracy.
Yeah.
How do you explain Jack Ruby?
Well, you're preaching to the choir. How do you explain all of the different people who were involved later on when President Nixon had his plumbers? Some of those people were involved. In fact, the Irishman caught that with E. Howard Hunt, the former FBI guy. Something's just wrong there. I don't profess to know what it is. But what about now Martin Luther King? There were so many people that hated him. Anyone could have done it. But do you think anybody was behind that?
That I don't know that much about.
Now, if I'm going to go out on a limb here and be frightened, how old were you
When JFK died?
Yeah, you weren't. No, I knew
I
you
was
weren't
a sty
alive.
in my dad's eye.
No, okay. What about Martin Luther King?
Same sty.
Okay.
I'm only 26, Bob.
I'm going to go down. Okay, you got anything else? Well, let's see if you have any other sports things before I send you on your way and open up the telephones.
Big game for the Seton Hall Pirates, home against Butler tonight. They're coming off a 2-game skid, so hopefully they'll right the ship. Knicks looks like they might sign Thibodeau. Don't know if he can fit in today's NBA. He's a hard-nosed defensive coach. He was fired. He's always been a winner, but I don't know if he can do what your coach that you were talking about, the hockey coach, if he can deal with today's players. They're all divas, Bob.
They're all divas,
Just
aren't
like
they?
Just like you.
Is that because we pay them too much money?
Yes.
Because I don't
And they've
suffer
been treated.
from that. Oh, the Majors made another trade. Let's see. In their first move ahead of next week's trade deadline, the Rangers acquired forward Julian Gauthier from the Hurricanes in exchange for defenseman Joey Keane. This guy Keane is supposed to be the real deal, too. Gauthier, 22, was Caroline's first-round pick. In 2016, he had skated in 44 games for the Hurricanes. Oh, well. He's been playing for the Charlotte Checkers. Do you know why they're called the Checkers?
Do not know.
Charlotte Motor Speedway, the checkered flag.
Interesting.
See all the little odd things I can share with you that have absolutely no value?
Think tank over here.
All right, Jake
Rochelle.
Schaefer, folks. He's with us each and every day, comes up with lots of ideas, and we're going to get a hold of this college kid. Jake's not going to tell him what my picks are. I will kick that young boy's butt. We'll be back, 914, and we're going to use our other line just to be sure we get you today. 914-999-4006, 914-999-4006. Stay right there. It is 8:31. Let's take a look at what's to come. We're going to talk with, I know Mitch has been trying to get in. We're going to talk with Mitch in a few minutes. So we have him in the dock. Ivar Hayden joins us at 8:50, the city councilman from New Rochelle District 4. And then we will be joined by none other than Richard Thomas, the former mayor of Mount Vernon. Give him a chance to answer some of these things and give his reaction to some of these things that he also endured when he was mayor. Some issues are making the news and others are not. The most striking that hasn't really made much news was the current controller's threat to the current mayor, saying that she would get the current mayor the same way she got Richard Thomas. But that's just one of 3 different stories we'll be talking with him about. Another now is the charges of favoritism regarding an appointment that the current president of the city council made to the office of the clerkship in that town. and still more. Yet I knew there was another story. I got to dig it up here. But plenty of stories coming out of Mount Vernon, so we will do that as well. We need to take a look at the weather, and the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. It's 41, no clouds now. It is sunny. The high is going to linger around 43 today, but a wind out of the northwest will make it feel like 30 through the afternoon, but it's a nice day nonetheless. Tonight, mostly clear and cold with lows around 22. The wind out of the northwest 10 to 15 miles an hour. Thursday, partly sunny and a little breezy still. The wind out of the northwest 10 to 15 miles per hour. Wind chills will mainly be in the 20s throughout the day with highs around 34. And the weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And the bottom of the hour is brought to you by Aging Issues Management and their partners Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, pluginvirtualreality.com, and Dominic's Fine Cigars. And all righty, let's see who's on the line. Good morning. You're on Mornings with Bob Marrone. You're on.
Hello, Bob. It's Mitch.
Mitchell.
Hello, Bob. It's Mitchell.
How are you? It's good to hear your voice. Let's catch up. First, what's on your mind?
Very little.
Well, there's not a lot of space there, so what we...
very little. I mean, I'm just so thrilled that we pardoned these good people yesterday. I'm sure you are too.
Yes.
So listen, Bernie Carrick, he's always been a stand-up guy.
Bernie Carrick is a skell that someone managed his way on the right side of the law, at least in his job, before he went to jail. Next.
Well, look, I don't know how we just talk if you're not going. If you feel Bernie Carrick is been a corrupt his whole life just because he was. I mean, really.
What else you want to? But again, the president has every right to do that. These are our laws. Bill Clinton.
This is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Trump the clown has the right. So God bless, dude. Listen. I think he should just empty the jails.
Well, continue, Mitch. I miss your snark. Continue, please.
Well, no. Look, it's all good, and I think there's a debate tonight.
Yes, there is. My boy Bloomberg's going to kick some butt tonight, but he's going to do it in a quiet, direct way.
Well, I got to tell you, if there's anybody that could get under Trump the clown's skin, it's Little Mike.
Little Mike.
Little Mike.
Little Mike.
Little Mike. Little Mike was asked if he really thought that the country's ready for another New York billionaire to be president. You know what his response was?
Wow.
Who's the other?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I just gave, probably it bored a lot of people, but I just gave an overview of how Mike built a business all by himself. Again, he surrounded himself with some very good people, but he did it with his severance package. Now, it was a good severance package, but he built that empire all by his lonesome, and he did it ethically, and he did it intelligently, and after he made his money, he wanted to be mayor and help fix the city that he lived in. So
true story. Michael Bloomberg said, after Trump won the presidency, he called him up and to congratulate him, and he said, "Listen, Mike," he said, "Donald, let me, give you one bit of advice. When I became mayor, I realized the only way to do it was just to surround myself with people who were smarter than me." And Trump's response was, "Yes, but who's smarter than me?"
Well, that's consistent at least.
So of course, Bloomberg, being the wise man he is, started talking about golf.
Okay.
Totally switched.
Well, one of the things about Bloomberg, he doesn't take bait. He is so self-assured that way. He has very thick skin, and the way he comes back at you with something factual or sarcastic, and then just holds his position. It's going to be very interesting.
God, yeah. Very, but I got to tell you, I'm really concerned now. I got Bernie, and now I got Michael Bloomberg, who's going to tell me how much soda I could drink. I mean,
hey, you like all that liberal stuff. He cares, but he shouldn't be telling you how much soda you should drink, especially for a capitalist. Otherwise someone's liable to tell him how much data they should buy, and then he would cry. Did you see yesterday? He made a promise that if he's elected president, he will put his company in a trust and sell it. Did you see that?
Yeah, but you know what? Unlike Trump, he sort of realized he's not going to live forever, so he's fine with that.
Well, plus he'll get billions for the company. I mean, I don't realize it's a cash cow, and somebody like Reuters or someone like that is going to buy it, or Thompson Financial.
But here's the difference. His company is really worth billions and billions.
Mm-hmm.
Some company is worth, a couple $100,000. There is no company.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference. And
give Trump his due. To be able to sell your name and put it on buildings and have people give you money. That's brilliant.
I give him credit. I give him credit. Trump's great because now people are paying him money to take the names off the buildings.
Oh. Well, didn't they do that over in those West Side apartment buildings?
Yeah.
The ones over by the river.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Well,
listen, it's going to be interesting. But as Bill Maher says, I think it's all irrelevant. This is all irrelevant.
Why?
Well, it's the debates. You really think that Trump's going to leave when he loses?
Yes.
No.
By the way, no. Yes, I think we all have to be very, including Mr. Bloomberg, who even though I support him, he jury rigged things in New York to get a third term. So he better be very careful about criticizing that one.
Oh yeah, you know what? He did it the old-fashioned way. He bought it. And listen, I'm not all that thrilled with the fact that so much money is in it. We got a lot of serious issues and problems we got to address in the next couple of years, and one is the money in politics. But did you hear? Speaking of money in politics, Yang was offering $1,000 per person per family.
Who did? Who what?
The Democratic candidate Yang.
Yeah.
With his plans, he would give you $1,000 a month.
Is he going to give me that out of his own pocket, or is he going to give me that from the government?
You didn't know about that?
Yeah, I did, but I thought he was going to give, but it wasn't going to be his money.
So someone said to Bloomberg, what do you think about that? He said, I'll match it, and I'll raise him another $1,000.
Now, I'm beginning to sense an underlying agenda here. Are you a Bernie fan who's trying to besmirch my boy? Which is all fair, by the way. Are you still in the Bernie camp?
Never have been, never will be.
Oh, okay. Because one of the things I wanted to ask you about is someone who understands local politics.
Can I just say this?
Sure.
And I mean this all sincerely. You're from Brooklyn, so
yes,
you can appreciate this. Bernie reminds me of one of my old uncles from Brooklyn.
But doesn't he? He reminds everybody's old uncle from Brooklyn.
And what I would say to Bernie, go back to Canarsie.
Oh, no. You know what, though? He needs to be listened to. There are things that he cares about that have resonated. That's why he has so many supporters. But
I think of course he needs to be listened because, he's almost as funny as Trump.
Oh, my goodness. Do you have a horse in the race yet? Or whomever comes out of the Democratic Party, which I would understand given your
obviously,
the uniform you wear.
Well, I think anybody on the Democratic side is far superior to Trump. But the president who I like, who's not going to win, but doesn't mean I can't support that person, is Amy Klobuchar.
I think she's going to be Mr. Bloomberg's vice presidential running mate. That's my prediction.
I think if she is, they're winning a landslide.
Well, we shall see. Now, I need to ask you about some local politics. And again, Mitch is with us. Mitch is involved in local politics, an honest-to-goodness affirmed Democrat, and does some work for them. I am beginning to get the sense that the center is beginning to push back on the hard left, the indivisible Westchesters, the New Roars, it's okay if Johnny kills somebody in the classroom, he had a rough type life crowd. Am I right? Is what I'm sensing true? I mean, Mimi Rocha wants to run against a fairly, what I would think is a competent guy. and she's running on and by the way, people speak highly of her. I must say, I've gotten lots of.
Listen, here's the interesting thing about that whole race, which things always get somewhat confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Is I think Mimi, I love her on MSNBC. Very bright, insightful individual, and she has a lot of support, I think, from Indivisible. Yet Anthony Scarpino is far more liberal than her. She has crucified before she announced that she was running Bernie Sanders, and she is claimed, and she said she's not a liberal, she's a moderate. Where Anthony Scarpino is probably one of the three most liberal DAs in the state, and that includes Bronx, Manhattan.
That's interesting.
Brooklyn. So it's interesting. He's much more to the left than she is, and yet she has the better support from him.
Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
I think sometimes it's perception. I think she's perceived to be more liberal.
No, why do you think that she's getting the support? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I have some people who believe that it's because she's a woman, pure and simple, which is fine in politics because that works. Now, though she's very, very capable. I don't want to detract from that at all. I mean, I've gotten some people I greatly respect who tell me, no, she's the real deal. She could do the job. My question is her motivation, but
no, and I think being female may play a role, but I think it's that we're stereotyping. We're looking at. Who was she a commentator for? What channel?
MSNBC.
Is there any channel more liberal?
No.
Henceforth, she must be a liberal, but they don't have.
No, I understand that, but again, the question I go back to is why is Indivisible Westchester back?
Well, let me finish. So you look at Anthony Scarpino, male Italian former FBI agent,
mm-hmm.
that screams conservative. But
moderate.
But he's not. He's really a liberal. So, that's why you always got to be careful putting people into boxes because they often don't fit into those boxes.
Actually, I agree with you very much. By the way, I heard a rumor, and a fairly well-documented rumor. I've heard that Ms. Kay, Councilwoman Kay, is warming up to the idea of coming on the radio.
Well, if once she hears that you've promoted her to Congresswoman, I think she'll be even more inclined.
You caught me on that one. Yeah, I do that all the time with these titles. Mitch is having talked with him for a while. He was trying to get in all last week when we had some phone troubles, and which we've since repaired. But what else is on your mind? I don't want to let you go without hearing a little bit more from you.
No, listen. I'm reaping the benefits of global warming. And just enjoying this Florida weather this winter, which I guess I'm calling nothing more than either a late fall and early spring. Winter.
It's a hoax. Global warming's a hoax.
Well, yes, and as New York and California and disappear underwater.
Don't forget, as Australia, it's a hoax. You liberals don't get it. It's a hoax. It's a hoax, my friend. Was, in fact, the Emoluments Clause is phony.
You know what, Bob? Here's the thing.
It's a hoax.
I respect people who say they're not positive or not sure that it's man-made that's causing the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't deny that it's actually happening.
No, it's kind of like the impeachment thing. It's like the people who went on and said he didn't do it. Now he even says he did it, but it was perfect. So which is it?
Of course. Well, listen, Trump. Listen. I think he's a clown, but he's a great snake oil salesman.
There's a lot of that.
There's never been one better.
Well, I don't know. Some of the televangelists. By the way, did you hear his favorite televangelist, the one in the White House, Reverend White? Did you hear what she said about? It's kind of funny, actually. What she said about Rachel Maddow?
I know.
She's possessed.
She is possessed. Yeah. Rachel Maddow's an extremely bright lady.
Of course she is.
But my goodness, every time I try to watch her, it's 45 minutes before she gets to a point.
Yeah, no, but what she does is she writes the narrative out if you know her background, and then she reads the teleprompter. And she's good at it. But
exactly.
Yeah.
exactly. But if you don't give it to me in the first 10 seconds, I'm on CNN already.
No, I understand that. But anyway, all righty. Anything else before we send you on your way? Oh, I do want to mention one other thing. Mayor Abramson has been on, and he is an avowed, unequivocal supporter of Buttigieg.
Yes, and why would that shock you?
It doesn't actually, but I would have thought that someone, because the mayor does have a lot of wisdom. He's also the mayor of a small city, but
yeah. Well, so just let me say two things, and I've had this discussion with Noam.
Yes.
Number one, up until Buttigieg went into the election, he never got as many votes in an election as Noam did. Number one. Number two, when Noam went mano a mano against South Bend, Indiana, for $1 million grant, it was Mayor Noam who walked away with that money, not Mayor Pete.
If Mayor Noam, by the way, ever runs for higher office, some people that don't like him call him Mayor Noam with a G.
Well, yes. But ask Noam who won that. Next time he's on, ask him.
I will. He'll be on at the top. He'll be on at the top of the month.
Which city got the money? New Rochelle or South Bend?
I know New Rochelle got the money. All right. Thank you very much, Mitch. Don't be a stranger. We got things sorted out.
Listen.
Yes.
One quick question, which I haven't asked you in a long time. How's the grandkids doing?
Wonderful. Ian is going off to play some college hockey, either right now another school, probably Ryder in New Jersey, or Rowan in New Jersey.
Wait a minute. Did you say going off to college?
Yeah, I know. It's my little boy.
I guess we first met when, how old was he?
When he used to come to the station, he was 4 or 5 years old. Yeah, he just had his senior night. It was a wonderful event. I got to post some pictures on Facebook. I haven't had a chance to do it. And my little girl is in high school now, and she comes on the radio like Ian used to and tortures me worse than he ever did. So.
God bless them.
It's one of the greatest things in my life, my friend. One of the best things ever happened to me. Thank you very much, Mitchell. We're going to take a quick break. Ivar Heiden's been trying to get in, and we will talk with him in a moment. Right now, it is 8:50, and after Ivar Heiden, we'll be talking with Richard Thomas. And I do want to get this stuff sorted out in terms of what we're going to talk about with him. But it's 41 degrees. It's going to get up to 42 today. Just a little update on the weather. It's sunny. It's going to stay that way. But it's going to feel chilly this evening, getting down to 30, maybe even down to 20 because of wind chill. So you will dress accordingly. And I do expect to hear from the city councilman any moment. Just an interesting observation. We've always tried in this experiment to share it with you. And that's why right now you can even see one of the cameras is open. Oh, that's my call. But for those of you who found me cranky this morning, sometimes I don't master the, look at that. I'm looking at a call that came in on my Skype. I'm still mastering a lot of the upgraded technology here. And when I get off on the wrong foot, boy, oh boy, does it cascade. And if it makes me cranky, I apologize. But anyone who has ever done this for a living knows what I'm talking about. There are so many different things to get a show started that come together. And when they don't go well, not that I'm a diva, mind you, but it puts me in a cross mood. So I like to share that with you because, again, I was taught never share the behind-the-scenes stuff, except one of the things I learned from Don Imus, and it's one of the few exceptions that I take with my own mentor, Don Imus and Howard Stern, who were the two most popular hosts, and that includes also Rush Limbaugh, who always talks about Snerdley, his board op and engineer. I think it has value when you share the experience, the real experience. All right, let's get to the phone where Ivar Heiden, City Councilman from District 4, is standing by. Good morning, Ivar. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Bob. How are you?
Pretty well. We just heard from Mitch. I don't know if you were listening to him.
I just heard the tail end of it. But,
in a cranky mood,
you know.
he was. A lot of things.
It's in a cranky mood.
Well, I was the one in a cranky mood. I was just sort of half apologizing for it. I had two systems that went down at the start of the show today, and then they asked me for a password. I almost threw everything out.
Yeah, I
And it
love
was
that.
60 seconds to air. What's your password? And so I had to, I had a little bit of a discussion with those who are technically gifted to say, we cannot have this. And I wound up being better. So I'm in trouble. At any rate, I digress. As you know, folks, Ivar Hayden is the city councilman from District 4 here in New Rochelle. An interesting thing happened the other day on my way. So I guess it was I was only wanted to go to 145 Huguenot for a meeting, okay? And I counted them. There were 6 digs in a 4 square block area.
Yep.
Now, I accept it. I know it's a sign of progress. But how does that work where you could have 6 going on at one time? It took me 40 minutes to go for like 3 blocks. I mean, who coordinates that? Or is it somebody drinking? Or is it just, are we stuck because of when Con Ed can do something? I couldn't believe it. I couldn't get to Harrison.
In part, there's certain things that, Con Ed is certainly out of our control, which is outrageous. Con Ed is, and the water company, they pretty much do whatever they feel like whenever they feel like it. Excuse me, we have very little control over that. No, I think, the big problem is simply that we have all of these projects going on, starting up pretty much, not all at the same time. Obviously, they're at different stages, but a lot of them in a concentrated area. And this is a real challenge. This is a major challenge, trying to move traffic and hopefully also let business that's here survive during this period. This is going to be a very rough couple of years.
Well, again, I accepted it.
We do have the police department working on it. City manager's office and public works are constantly on it, trying to organize this. Certainly, Councilmember Tarantino and I are always, on the phone, trying to.
Well, I must say,
trying to get some kind of information as to the scheduling of all of this kind of thing, and it's very difficult to try to get that. And it's not really the city's. I can't really fault the city.
I do understand that, and that's why I wanted to say thanks to you and Al, and that's why when you guys come on, I bring this up, because it's helped us understand that this is a necessary growing pain. And so I wasn't upset. In fact, I didn't want to credit the police department, because they really, in the rain and the snow and the cold and the sleet, they did a wonderful job of trying to get people around it. I think they feel our pain. And so if you roll down your window and say, where do I go? They're not gruff. They're understanding. Trying to get down your street, Burling Lane, it's what I may do is, we have that segment we do every Friday where we handicap stuff. I may start handicapping which days you can go down it. Like today, when I make the left turn on Burling Lane, will it be open?
Yeah. No, today's actually fine. But you're right. It depends. It all depends. And then, of course, we've started the major sewer work along Main Street, and that is, and some of it has been accomplished already. A small part of it, but that's going to be a major disruption. And we have 2 buildings. We have a building, the Maple Avenue site, Old Blessed Sacrament, and that is going to be starting soon. We have Church Division. 2 major buildings that's underway now, where they're actually hammering and starting to bring in the rebar and build the foundation. There's so much stuff going on, and that's in that area. That's a little further down than here. Here in the heart of the downtown, closer to the train station, there's even more stuff going on.
Well, all kinds of things going on. And I understand, and I know it's not in your bailiwick. We have a new member of the bid to replace the existing guy.
I've heard that. Unfortunately, I have not met the person.
Well, I think it was done, and if this is a jab, it's well intended. I think it was done by fiat. Actually, I don't think that the board ever had a chance to vote on it. They just did it. But I understand it's a very qualified person, and we're anxious to learn more about her.
Yeah, well, as I say, I know absolutely nothing. This whole process has been kind of shrouded in mystery, and very important person for me to work with. So I'm looking forward also to meeting whoever he or she is, and and working with them on what is going to be a real challenge for the next 3 or 4 years. It's going to be extremely difficult for anybody operating the downtown bid to accomplish anything given the situation at the moment.
Well, I heard though. You know what? This person comes out. I wish I knew her name. I think it's a woman who did a similar job in Yonkers. And if you can work in Yonkers, you certainly can work here. So we wish her nothing but the best. But we do want to get her on and share her what she's going to do with the rest of the city. Now, one of the things that you and Al had recommended to me. You and Congress, I keep doing that all day. Councilman Al Tarantino had recommended, Bob, take a drive around the city and look at the storefronts. And you guys are so right. There are way too many that are empty. And I know that there's an effort afoot to make some of these storefronts that are in the new buildings available. And apropos of that, I was at 360 the other day for a meeting. That building is beautiful, by the way, over at 360.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Any progress on that front, or are you waiting for the new
Yeah,
bid person to take?
I think in general, I can really only say in general that last conversations that I've had with developers, they are certainly much more responsive to the idea that they're going to have to work with the city, work with businesses, work with young entrepreneurs coming in, and in terms of lowering the rents or offering build out or doing something in order to generate the right kinds of businesses that we want to see in the downtown. They certainly don't want vacant retail spaces in their building. It doesn't look good for them trying to rent their apartments. It certainly doesn't look good for the city. We want a vibrant and active streetscape. So, but they are now, I think, genuinely concerned.
Oh, that's great.
That we're going to have a lot of first floor space available, and we need to fill it up.
Well, that is good news.
Let's hope that that those are meaningful discussions. We have a couple of consultants as well that are working with us on the city and with the IDA to also find appropriate uses for these retail spaces, because we have the same conversation about retail all the time, Bob. But
no, I know,
there are other ways to utilize the space.
Absolutely.
So,
and this is good to
hopeful.
hear. Now, what's on your mind? What would you like to shout out about? Because I ask you a lot of these same questions because they come up and I get calls from people and I get inquiries. And believe me when I tell you that this stuff is useful. And by the way, I must say they've been working really well here on the bathrooms here at the train station. And
I'm glad to hear that.
Not making a lot of noise, and we're able to continue with our programming unabated.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's a long time coming, and I think absolutely necessary.
Now, what's on your mind?
I'm glad they're doing that, and getting that done finally.
What's on your mind?
I'm sorry, bud.
I'm sorry. No, I stepped on your line.
What's on my mind?
What's on your mind?
I had a very interesting meeting down at the College in New Rochelle the other day.
Yes.
With the Residents Park Association. The college campus has been bought by the Masons.
Yes.
By I shouldn't say an auction. I don't know, a division.
No, it was that auction.
The Masons, which is a huge organization, and this is the part of the Masons that actually runs senior homes and facilities, educational components, things like that. And we had a very nice meeting with members of the Residents Park Association. They were very forthcoming. I have to say they were very nice.
The Mason
answered all of our questions.
The representatives from the Masons? Okay, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I left with a hopeful feeling that they want to do something, obviously, that works for them, but also protects the neighborhood. So that was encouraging. And we're going to have many more dialogues with them going forward. So it was nice. It was a good. It was a very good meeting. Lasted a couple of hours, and a lot of there was a lot of give and take with the residents and the Masons, who in this case I suppose you could call the developers.
Yes.
But a kind of different, a little different feeling in terms of in terms of dealing with most of the developers in the downtown, because this organization, at least in part, is certainly concerned about doing good.
Well, it's not just dollars.
The same group that runs the Children's Shriners Hospitals and things like that that's positive stuff. So
yeah, it sounds very
so
good.
We'll see.
You were very concerned, and just to remind our listeners, my guest is Councilman Ivar Hayden from District 4 here in New Rochelle, and now for over a year, you've expressed great concern about how this is playing out, and it does seem, by all reports, and certainly this encouraging one, that it will go well. I loved that neighborhood when I first came here. That is where I hung my hat at Residence Park,
Yeah,
except
it's a
for
beautiful
parking.
neighborhood. The trick is trying to maintain as many of the old buildings as possible, and keeping the central quad and the campus intact.
Well, that is a beautiful
I'm sure
campus.
there's going to have to be some, there will be some changes. But as I say, the discussions were very friendly, and they seemed to be honest and open. And so I am encouraged.
Were the
And
residents?
We'll see how it goes.
Were the residents encouraged, Councilman?
Yeah, I think so.
That's great, because
I
I've
think
been
so.
at meetings with
that's
them.
That's why I meant there were several residents there expressing their feelings. And I think for the most part, they heard answers that they were comfortable with. Now, of course, proof is in the pudding, as we all know, going forward with all of these things. But I did get the feeling that that this organization was genuinely interested in trying to preserve the neighborhood quality, and also obviously achieve what they need to achieve for themselves. So there might be some changes going forward, but I don't think, at this point, they sound like potentially reasonable changes. So we'll see.
Anything else on your mind that you want to shout out about?
I'm just really, I'm concerned again, as Al is, about small business being able to survive during this period in the downtown, and it's a real issue. And I think we're going to have to see, if we have North Avenue Bridge closed at the same time, which now,
yikes,
I understand there's actually some talk now about the Thruway Authority actually doing this, which they've been talking about for 10 or 12 years. If that happens at the same time, it's basically going to cut the downtown off from the north side of New Rochelle altogether. And that's kind of a scary thing. So,
well, how do well, there are ways to get around that, no? The proper detour? I'm sure
Well, we are. I mean, there are detour plans that have been in place for quite a while, actually, because we've been threatened with this for quite a while. But it's just going to make traffic situation a lot worse. And there's no way around that. I mean, it is.
It's just a bullet we have to bite to have this more modern city. If I may, if you got another couple of minutes, there was this sensibility a couple of weeks ago or so about preserving, which we all care about, preserving buildings that are of historic importance, and also some sort of a moratorium. Spoke with the mayor about it as well. And the common sense is there's no need to stop anything, but it's okay to just get a sense, though, of where we're going and are we doing the right things. What is your take? What is the city council saying?
Well, I think we should move forward with historic preservation. I would move forward with it more quickly than the normal bureaucratic process. I think that we've already identified at least, I would say, 8 or 9 buildings in the downtown that are worthy of historic landmarking that I don't think there's any argument or discussion about.
Can you name a couple just for people who are interested in this?
For example, the two most obvious examples are Trinity Church and Blessed Sacrament.
Yep.
The churches themselves, which are beautiful buildings. But then if you go along Main Street, certainly the facades of the old RKO movie theater building should be preserved. The Masonic Temple, which was originally a Masonic temple at the corner of Main Street and LeCount?
I know it well.
That pillared building on the corner.
Yeah, I used to park
that's
there.
a building that definitely should be landmarked. And there are several others, and I would go as far as saying that even the HSBC building, which is not historically old building, but it's a mid-century modern piece of architecture. I would landmark that building.
There's a building on the corner of Main and Division that says built in 1894. It's a wonderful brick structure. Is that on the list?
It's certainly on the. It's certainly.
That's a beautiful building.
It's on the list that's being looked at, and what we're doing now is we set up a preservation committee, and that's going to have its first meeting, I think, in a week. And we're trying to accelerate the process. I mean, there is bureaucracy that's involved with this. There's all kinds of layers and levels of landmarking and preservation. I mean, as I said, I would like to move it forward much more quickly on some of the buildings we already know we don't have any discussion about, that we all feel strongly about. But there is a process, and it's complex, and it has to go through the state, and, you know, in some cases, I guess the feds, I'm not sure. So we're looking at a process that's probably going to take 6 to 9 months, but we're trying to get it done as quickly as possible.
That makes a lot of sense.
Unfortunately, you know, we have lost a couple of the buildings that I would have liked to have saved, but they weren't lost as a result of the current development, process. They were lost years ago when the city had no sense whatsoever as to how valuable some of these buildings were. Like the old firehouse, for example,
Yes.
the first fire station, which was a spectacular building, and was the city permitted someone to buy it and gut it. Now it's coming down as part of one of the development things, but that building was destroyed inside, 30 years ago. There's so many other buildings like that nobody paid any attention to, going way back.
Well,
The city seemed to have absolutely no interest in this whatsoever.
Well,
and that's very disappointing, So
well, hopefully
we've got to save whatever we can save now.
Well, hopefully it can be integrated into all of this development so that we have a nice balanced plan at the end of it all. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think that's the goal, is to have a fair and balanced plan in every way, in terms of affordable housing, in terms of proper urban use, an active and interesting streetscape, a place where you would want to come, where you want to live, hopefully where you want to have your business. For the first time, we have a couple of developers who are interested, I think, in actually building office space in part of these.
Heard that.
In some, as part of these projects.
That is good news.
I'm encouraged by that, and I think if things don't totally tank on the national scene, and I think with a little bit of care, which is what all of us on city council want to do, a little bit of care, that we'll be able to achieve that long-term goal, which is making the city a much better place, more financially solvent, and also a much more exciting and interesting place to live.
Well, I want to thank you for all of that information. Oh, it sounds like you got a bit of a cold there, too. You got to take care of yourself, Councilman.
Yeah, I don't know what, it's not really a cold. It's some kind of allergy that has, I don't know whether it has relationship to the heating system or whatever the heck it is. But, some days, all of a sudden, I just start sneezing. There's no rhyme or reason.
Well, be careful. Be well.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Thank you very much. Ivar Hayden, District 4, City Councilman here in New Rochelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. Take care.
We're going to take a quick break. He's already in the house. The former mayor of Mount Vernon, Richard Thomas. We're going to be talking about a number of different stories. One, the fact that the current controller has threatened the existing mayor, the current mayor, that she would, treat her the same way that she treated Richard Thomas and get her out of there. Also, now stories today, Mount Vernon officials are saying that the city is liable for the tennis bubble demolition, but that's only on the basis of the short-term administration of Andre Wallace, where they said, yeah, we shouldn't have done it. Were they speaking? Was that opinion, or were they speaking officially? And a political favor charges are leveled as a new deputy city clerk is appointed in Mount Vernon. A lot to talk about. Richard Thomas joins us to talk about those stories and more in just a few moments. Right now, our last report of the weather this morning, and it's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. 41, the temperature is going to hover around 41 to 42 degrees today as we have a sunny day, but it'll chill out tonight because of wind and gusts up to 30 miles an hour. In the later afternoon, it's going to be about 30 degrees, and then as we get through the evening, down to 22, but still clear. Tomorrow, partly sunny and a little breezy. The wind out of the northwest, 10 to 15 miles an hour. We'll get temperatures mainly in the 20s, but getting up to 34 during the day. And tomorrow night, getting down to 15 degrees. And it is 9:12, and we go to our long-form interview, and there are a number of issues, and we're going to ask the mayor to take a seat as we put the light on him. Pardon? Yeah, we do, but we're already on the air, Mayor, so. You probably don't need the headphones, but I do want to do a little prep for people. Last week, the mayor forwarded us the video, as did other people. The current mayor of Mount Vernon was holding the comptroller accountable and challenged her in a number of ways, which we'll talk about with Richard Thomas in a moment. But as she was being escorted out of City Hall, wasn't arrested, but things got so agitated that she had to be escorted out of City Hall, and she said that she would, and the mayor can quote it more directly, but that she would get her the way she got Richard Thomas, whatever that means. And we already know the history of Richard Thomas. That's one issue we're going to talk about straight off the bat. Now, the mayor sent out, as Mayor Thomas, sent out a letter to all of the news services. We got a copy of it. An email actually, that says, why is this not news? And we considered it news, and we reported it at the time, and we're reporting it again. Two other stories, one which puts this mayor, square back in the middle of an issue. And this goes back to when he felt that the tennis courts were existing illegally in the sports complex known as Memorial Field in Mount Vernon. And he knocked them down in the middle of the night. Now, many people have said he shouldn't have done it. Other people have said he did the right thing. We'll get his opinion in a moment. When Andre Wallace took over for the short span as acting mayor, he obviously made the statement, or at least if I can infer from this newspaper article, that yes, the city acknowledged that it was a breach of its agreement, which may put the city in a tough situation legally. And so naturally, the Keeler tennis businesses lawyers are saying, quote, this case is about dishonest politicians who blatantly broke the law. And the third issue, again, things in Mount Vernon, we already told you and shared with you in our conversation with A.J. Woodson that there was this meeting last week where the city council president voted to fire a deputy clerk, only now to find out that there's a new deputy clerk by the name of William Holmes, sworn in the post by City Council President Lisa Copeland. But there is a sense that it is a political favor. So those are just three of the stories. And we're going to start out right at the top. And you will recall yesterday during my monologue, I mentioned that whatever happens in Memorial Field, the guy that put it on the front page from the day he ran to the day he left office was Richard Thomas. So please welcome back with us. And I got to be sure, did I put lights on you, Mayor Thomas? Yes, I did.
I was trying to get this to go live too, but it's.
Do you have an issue with you? Well, we have. You can just pick up our feed.
Yeah, I'm picking up with you. I got you.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's good to have you on. One of the, in fact, today during my monologue, I mentioned that we here, at least at Radio Westchester, we have no intention of letting these issues die.
I appreciate that because I'm telling you, nobody seems to really care about the facts, and nobody really seems to care about, what is, what's what the sequence is.
But the question is, why did no one realize what a big deal that was that she threatened to get the mayor the way she got you? And what were the words that she used exactly?
I don't recall entirely, but I think it was something to the effect, if you call the DA, I'm going to get you like I got Thomas. And it's just like, it just goes to show you how malicious, how vicious, how vindictive, how despicable politics is. There seems to be no concern about policy.
Well, what were they? Well, before we get even into policy,
sure.
Okay, that the fact that there's dysfunction in your city is not even news anymore. The question now becomes, and it lies in the details, what was the mayor charging? Because you know the issues well. You lived it for almost 4 years. What was Mayor Sean Patterson Howard accusing the comptroller of?
Almost verbatim, she laid out how millions of dollars are basically gone. And what does that mean? That means that There were millions of dollars for monies to fix the streets that the comptroller rejected. So that's
when you say rejected, did she reject to pay those bills?
Based on what the mayor said, she said she won't accept it from the state of New York. So those monies typically, once they get returned back to the state, they go back into the fund and get redistributed. So why would you want to turn down $1.2 million to go fix roads in Mount Vernon? We desperately need that money to fix roads. She talked about how other monies, be it grant monies or other bills, have not been paid. And, she referenced during the time I was mayor, these bills are still outstanding. So,
but these are the bills that we have been told by sources that allege that you didn't prepare them properly or that they were inappropriate, and that's why they weren't paid.
So
you get a chance to answer that again. So not to relitigate the whole effort.
But let's take that point and just everybody think of how dumb that sounds. The mayor did not prepare the bills properly. It's not my job as mayor to prepare the bills. It's my job as mayor to oversee the commissioners and work through and with them to make sure the administration of the city happens. Now, you have career civil servants, people that took exams to do this function. Taryn Vandenberg is one of them. She does timekeeping for DPW. There are a few other people in DPW, just focusing on them, that have been there for a very long time that prepare bills in collaboration with the comptroller's office. So if the standards change by the comptroller all of a sudden without reason, without explanation, then that's on the comptroller. But the reality is union employees are preparing the bills. I just don't understand how all of a sudden they can forget or prepare them incorrectly when the exam that they took and passed and got certified to do this role basically, makes them qualified to do it. So I just don't understand how can a bill not be. It just doesn't make any logical sense.
As you observed this going on, what was the comptroller's response, and why did it escalate to the degree that it did?
It's hard to tell because at this point in time, the response seems to be just keep lying to the people. And even with this situation with the Memorial Field tennis bubble.
We'll cover that
next. We're going to cover that?
Okay. No, we're going to get to that. Don't worry. I have it on the agenda.
All right.
Let's stick with, because as you know, I spent a lot of time saying the controller is either a hero or something else, trying to preserve the integrity of the city and its money, or there are issues there. What was her reaction to Sean Patterson Howard's charges in your view? And where do you think Sean Patterson Howard should go with this?
So, based on what the video shows, it shows the comptroller being escorted out by the police. So it's obvious that whatever Mayor Patterson Howard said to Comptroller Reynolds prompted her to, lose her cool, which she does quite often. And it prompted her to approach in the direction of the mayor, and it prompted her to scream and shout. And if the police were to determine that conduct as mischievous or threatening, which it appears to be, she could be charged with the real crime. But again, I just know.
Well, it seemed to stop short of that.
But for some reason, no matter who it is, everybody gives the controller a pass. Why? Because she controls the purse, literally. And if, she's asserting powers and privileges that are far beyond the scope of her role, what Mayor Patterson Howard echoed, she said, the controller is supposed to do something very specific. She doesn't have these additional powers. Well, I'd like to inform everyone that that's why I got 5 court orders, at least 5 of them.
5
be
court
it against
orders.
the council.
What were
and the
those
controller.
court orders? Let's stick with the controller. We'll get to the council.
But specific to the
next.
controller, it's about obstruction. You're not supposed to obstruct the executive function of the city.
No.
And that's all the controller does. And then she points the finger back at the mayor saying, you didn't prepare the bills properly. Well, then guess what? Your job is to help us make sure it gets done right. Come sit down next to us and help us do the bills right so we can pay these bills, so we can have salt on the streets, so we can have asphalt to put down and potholes, you name it. But that's all the easy stuff. The question is, why is it so complicated to process a bill in Mount Vernon? I mean, you got Apple Pay, Venmo, Cash App, Western Union. You got so many different ways to make payments in America today. Why is it so complicated to take a bill from upstairs and bring it downstairs? It doesn't make any sense. It's a lot of waste of time and money.
Are you surprised that the current mayor has run into this issue? I'm
surprised that it happened so fast. I didn't expect it to happen until maybe April or May, after a while.
Let's go back to the court orders. Sure. In the brief, what did they say?
They made it clear that, Judge Kakay said, the founders of Mount Vernon believed that the mayor had the right to inspect the books at any given time, to appoint or assign people to inspect the books and provide reports.
Did you ever get to do that?
No.
Now, did the judge ever cite anyone for contempt for not following that?
No. And
did you appeal to the judge?
We did.
And?
Crickets? Nothing. Crickets.
In all 5 cases, were they different judges or the same
different judges, different issues. But what it does is it positions this mayor to take those very court orders and go back to the judge and enforce them. So
she can still use those court orders?
She can, and she can even go to the bank and open the books if she wants.
Now, Mayor, to be, well, of course, we wouldn't be anything other than candid. Yeah. But there are times when I bring these up with other reporters or other people who work in the city. They'll say, it is reported, no one has proven this, that, although I think you've admitted in some cases, if I got it right, that you paid certain bills out of accounts other than what they were intended because you couldn't get them paid otherwise. Now, we don't want to put you in any legal jeopardy.
So this is where it gets, utterly confusing. So let's take the example of bail reform and evidence reform.
Okay.
And there are new requirements on both ends that are driving everybody up the wall. We don't have the money to produce this information in 15 days. We don't have the ability to keep, allowing people to go in and out of jail like a revolving door, right? Okay. So you have all these tensions that are built in. And this is where reforms, you expect the legislators and those that are there to administer the law to sit down and work out the differences quickly. Hopefully there is a reform to the reform coming, whether it be on bail reform or evidence reform. But think about that conflict. So here we have 5 court orders that say different things. One, the mayor has the executive authority to appoint. Mayor has the executive authority to even take action under emergency circumstances to deal with these emergencies to the city. And if you take each case in isolation and you look at it and you say, what were these all different for? They're all connected to something that is of major concern and interest to the health, welfare, and safety of the city. Okay. In many cases, when you step back and look at Mount Vernon in its totality, it's hard to see, the forest from the trees. And this is where I want to focus everybody on. Think about Memorial Field. All of a sudden now we got $25 million to fix it. All the money that was wasted in the past, all the fighting to stop me from cleaning it up, all that, just forget about it. We're not even going to look at it. We're just going to let it go. We're going to fix up the field. And oh, by the way, Ernie forgot how the illegal dirt and debris got there. No action whatsoever by anybody. Crickets. But I have to stop there because you have to think about, the payola that went down for that to happen. Somebody got paid off big time.
And we may never know.
And we will never know because their focus is get rich Thomas, because he's not going along to get along. And you can see it playing out very slowly and surely.
There were those that will say that this is sour grapes at this point.
It can't be sour grapes because the reality is the reality. The field got dumped on. If this happened in Eastchester, a person would have been found and convicted. And guess what? It did happen in Eastchester. And guess what? Somebody was found and convicted.
No.
When it happens in a black community, all of a sudden it's like the rules don't apply.
Now, Andre Wallace.
And this is where I'm just like, look, even Andre Wallace, he has a motivation as well.
No, but
we'll talk about his motivation in a moment.
He was following up on where you were and was able to remove the dirt. Why was he finally able to do it? Where did the funding come from?
And that's where, again, you have to follow the money here. The money that from what I understand was used. They took it from the water department to pay that bill, and
they took that from the water department.
That's what it
just
appears
like you
to be.
did.
That's what it appears to be.
Or would you allege to have?
No. But this is where, again, I don't want to get too sophisticated when it comes to the accounting of this. But I want to express there's nothing we did that was different. All we did was offer, as part of the budget process, to sit down with each branch to reconcile the books. Mm-hmm. We kept a running log, a running tally of all the activities in each of the departments, all the overages, and when it came time to try and reconcile the books with the controller, be it Maureen Walker or Deborah Reynolds, they refused to sit down. And if you look at the budget actions, be it by the council and the controller, when I was mayor, they just totally resisted. They rejected. They did not want to even discuss numbers whatsoever. They just did their own thing.
Do you think that's going to continue now for Sean Patterson Howard?
It has not continued to that extent. The council and the mayor have now aligned. So the controller is the odd one out. So they now have to figure out how to get the controller to work with them.
Well, we're not sure yet, because there's a story today now that involves the city council, and the president there is being accused of perhaps using sleight of hand.
But this is where the confusion and chaos, there's an ability for someone to profit. And this is why I want to go back to fully answering your question about, what happened. How did we operate under such obstruction? We looked at the court orders we got. We spoke with our various outside counsel, Jerry Kremer being one of the main ones, Maria Donovan being another one, inside special counsel. But I named them specifically.
Maria Donovan, I thought she was
a special counsel.
But I didn't know she was a lawyer.
She was a lawyer, that's correct. And this is where you have to look at why we had to design our operation around lawyers, to make sure that every decision we made was consistent with the law. It was legal. That's the first question. If it's legal, we're gonna make sure then we go to the next question. Is it ethical? Is it moral? And those are the three ways we approached every decision, because it was like, it was like the Civil War, where the North surrounded the South and said, we're going to cut off all the money and all the supply, and we're going to starve them out. That's the tactic that was used. But we found a way to say, look, we're going to keep everything on hold. We're going to, instead of at the end of the year, this is what usually happened. This was the process. The controller, the mayor, and the council would sit down. The mayor would say, all right, there are overages in recreation. There are overages in DPW. There are overages here, here, and here. We're out of money. We're out of balance. And the controller would come in and say, well, we're now going to take whatever money we need from the water department and pay the overages in each department.
Right.
It's the same thing.
And then, but again, having my own Wall Street background, you have to have journals and documentation.
And all of that is there. And that's where, when you work with the commissioners, you work with all of the staff, the union employees that are all there, everything was held waiting for that reconciliation. So think about now the setup here. They're saying, oh, he did all this wrong, and let's investigate him, let's get him. Jesus Christ, I was doing the same exact thing that every administration did. The only thing that happened was they obstructed. They did not want to sit at the table and reconcile the books. And once you do the reconciliation, it's done.
Now,
that's how the government works in Mount Vernon.
You requested the New York State Controller to come in and do an audit. They came in for a day and a half and left. Did you ever get an answer as to why they left? Other than, I saw the emails. No. I saw the...
No.
And what would happen when you call their office? I mean, don't you
silence.
have to, as a mayor, don't you have, or as an executive, a chief executive of a city in this county, don't you have a line to the controller's office?
And that's where, politics, relationships come into play. I thought that I had good relationships with a lot of people in state government. I worked for the governor back in 2008. But every time I turned around, it just seemed that the politics kept shifting away once you start empowering people and you start doing the right thing. And the right thing is, think about it, supporting ordinary people. Now, that may sound cliche. It may sound like a bunch of fluff. But everybody, please, Google it. The last time somebody was shot and killed in Mount Vernon was 2017. That's a big deal for Mount Vernon. A huge one. So we did a lot of things very differently to create safety, but also there are a lot of people that are angry, and I want to point to two reasons.
But I just want to hold you off on that because I don't know that people are ready to hear you relitigate what you went through in terms of what you may have accomplished. That's more on the political lines. I'm more interested in the injustice that may have taken place.
And here's where the justice becomes questionable, and this is why I want to point out the motives of why they're so upset with Richard Thomas. And you ask yourself, there was a street light deal where somebody was supposed to pocket $10 million off of the people of Mount Vernon. Instead of that money going to somebody's pocket, I made sure it went back to the city's coffers. Mm-hmm. And that's where I always pointed to every time I turned around. Now, that's a generalization.
It's not a generalization. What do you mean somebody's pocket? No, but it's a generalization in that I don't know the specifics.
So the specifics is anybody out there listening can Google. Yeah. They can see who had the contract. You can see all the controversy around that contract. And when I took steps to give the savings to the city, there goes $1 million a year that the city has on its electric bill alone. So every time I sat at the table with the city council or the comptroller, I said, look, we created savings in multiple locations. Mm-hmm. We generated revenue in various areas. So the little tiny things in the whole scheme of the $115 million budget, we're talking about a couple $100,000 a year that we had to spend on an emergency basis based on the obstruction. Okay. That we had to make sure we moved in a legal manner, following the advice of the law department. Here we are now trying to be accused of doing what? Our job? Come on, give me a break.
Well, let's move on to something else that no one's accused you of anything in this case, but the inference is clear, mm-hmm. or the implication is clear. And that is the story today that the lawyers for the so-called tennis bubble, mm-hmm. okay, Kayla Tennis, they're arguing now, they're suing the city, saying that the city's liable for the tennis bubble demolition, a decision that you made, but they're basing it on the acting mayor's admission, if you will, that it was inappropriate. Now, I don't know if that's going to cost the city or if he got that in the advice of counsel. But you're the guy that knocked them down. Why did you do it?
First, let's take this first step. First, does Keller Tennis have any silent partners that we should know about? Let's ask that question and answer that question.
Don't know.
Okay, so maybe we should get some answers to that. If they have any silent partners that are public officials or were public officials.
But that doesn't justify you knocking it down.
But it speaks to the motive behind why, the shift in decision. Now, let's remind everybody about the facts. The U.S. Department of Justice has the city of Mount Vernon in court right now seeking huge fines and penalties for violating the Clean Water Act. That's one.
That I know.
Two, the same thing goes for Memorial Field. The DEC has full control over that site because of the illegal dumping that, of course, Ernie forgot how it happened.
Okay, but get back to the tennis ball.
But here's the point. Right before any action was taken to, take action to clean up the site, in accordance with, 1, the DEC's mandate, and 2, the US DOJ's Violations of Clean Water Act. Mm-hmm. Those are two big environmental issues that the city is facing.
Understood.
But it ties in because look at the timeline. From January of 2018, we made it clear to Keller Tennis we wanted to work with them to take every action to not only make them whole, but to build them a bigger facility where their footprint is. Mm-hmm. But we have to, 1, clean up the debris that's below the tennis courts that were put there illegally. 2, we have to make sure that they recognize that we got the full right and authority to elevate their courts by about 15 to 20 feet and put all of the 8 courts in one location behind the park. But this is all important because they agreed to it. They said yes. They understood the mission and vision. We had renderings done. We were going back and forth with the county, but all of a sudden, the politics got real nasty. And this is what happened. 1, you had the situation where the DEC and the DOJ said to Mount Vernon in April of 2018, mm-hmm. look, we're going to penalize you. We're going to sue you. You have not acted to clean up Memorial Field. You have not acted to comply with the Clean Water Act. That's what they said. That's what they
Okay, but
then
how does
took
that translate into knocking down the bubble?
It translates because what happened was they sent their one, they filed their lawsuit. Think about it. In June of 2018, the DOJ filed their lawsuit against Mount Vernon for noncompliance. We were desperately taking every step to comply with environmental mandates. And within the contract that Keller Tennis had with the city of Mount Vernon, there are clauses in there. We followed every step of those clauses. And one of the clauses says you can revoke the operating license of the licensee, of the operator, under certain conditions.
Right.
And those conditions were A, very broad, and B, had a very specific sequence. We followed that to the T.
But did that allow you to knock it down?
And it goes on to saying that in the contract, it says the city can reclaim the control of the property by force if necessary. And those are the provisions that the law department made their determination under. This was not a surprise.
Okay, so
the
did
city
you get
council
something?
was briefed.
Did you get something in writing from the law department?
The contract, and that the answer is yes. And the law department has all the documents, and that's where you have to look at it and look at it very closely. The law department spearheaded this. They were in court back and forth. They had their lawyers talking to their lawyers.
Did you notify these people that you were going to knock down the bubble?
They were told that we were going to take every action to reclaim control of the site.
But specifically that you were going to knock it down.
And
not that you should
no,
have.
no,
I don't
but
know
I'm just
enough
telling you,
about it.
they were provided every notice under the terms of the contract. They were provided every courtesy. The council was provided every notice and every courtesy. But here goes the emotional aspect. It takes away from the business side of this. Now all of a sudden, the city's they're gonna try and hit the city for millions of dollars of something. Meanwhile, when you look at the facts, there's no retaining wall, there's no plumbing, there's illegal debris below the courts. The DEC and the Department of Justice suing Mount Vernon to clean that stuff up. It's like how much more authority do we need to invoke to clean up a situation that we're being ordered to clean up?
So why was it necessary to knock it down at any rate? Because you
this
wanted to clean up underneath it? In other words, had you not knocked it down, would they have been able... Let me just extend this.
Yeah.
Had you not knocked it down, would they have had to knock it down eventually to get rid of the debris?
Yes.
Is that your position?
Yes, and Judge Lohr even said that. Judge Lohr even said that it does not belong there. And this is a judge that was assigned to the case because the city council sued out of fear of, and again, while it's sued out of fear of impacting the tennis courts. The question is, what's under the courts? What's under the courts are debris that must be removed based on the DEC's order. And this is where it gets even more ridiculous. In 2017, July, the DEC ordered us to test the soil below the tennis courts. And they gave us the option of doing, the traditional way or a new way where it's less invasive, very small incisions. But I say this because this was the threat we were given by the state. The threat was we're going to penalize you $7,500 a day going back to July of 2017. And you do July of 2017 to July of 2018, that's $2.5 million just for not testing below the tennis courts. So just everybody do the math. I have something in writing from the state. Okay, I have a contract that says we can do this.
Let's bring it full circle.
And the law department says go for it. And now you have, and this is where I think the setup is very, very clear. The people that have an interest in those tennis courts, the politicians that
who has an interest in those tennis courts?
That's the question. I don't know. Does Keller Tennis have silent partners that we all should know about? Should they, have? Has that been disclosed?
Let's move on. You're not the mayor now, so you can't defend this. But had you stayed in office, would you have defended this lawsuit?
Absolutely, and that's where you look at what
it's
else
already
was
compromised. The mayor's already said
this is part of the reason why they wanted me out of the way, because that's not the only case they sought to settle. As soon as I stepped aside, they sought to settle other cases that had no business being settled, or even the thought of being settled. There's a company that was running a bottling company in a residential neighborhood. They had no permits. They had no permissions. They had everything out of code. We took steps to try and work with them, to try and get them to come into compliance. They sued us, and they tried, and from what I understand, Wallace tried to settle with them for $750,000.
Acting Mayor
Yeah.
Andre Wallace.
Yeah, so think about that. It's like, wait a minute. They have no right, title, interest, and you just want to all of a sudden roll over, and then you appoint that person to the board, to a planning board. Just think about the conflict of
there's
interest.
nothing you can do about that now.
But this is the point I'm making. Think of how the taxpayers are being fleeced. All of a sudden, they just want to roll over and say, go ahead, take it. And it's like we had every right, title, and interest to execute and implement the terms of the contract.
9:42. My guest is former Mount Vernon Mayor Richard Thomas, discussing the recent conflict, a number of issues today. The recent conflict between the current mayor and the comptroller, Deborah Reynolds. Again, he no stranger to that, going through similar and worse when he was in office. And of course, talking about the story today in Lohud regarding the lawsuit from Kayla Tennessa versus the city of Mount Vernon for the actions by the city when Mayor Thomas was in power of taking the bubble down. There was another article I wanted to get you to weigh in on.
Sure.
There seems to have been, and I don't understand enough about it, we lay people don't.
What's that?
First of all, there was a deputy city clerk that the city council is responsible for hiring, but nonetheless, she was dismissed, and it seemed that it was done without the approval of the council. And then there was an ex post facto meeting some Friday night. Not everyone could make it. And then now we see that someone else has been put in that job, and it's being called by Jonathan Bandler in the Lohud today that it's a political favor. Do you know anything about this? Do you know why this is going on?
You know, and this is, again, think about it now. What if the mayor or the comptroller decide to not pay this guy that just got appointed? And I heard, by the way, the comptroller is not paying certain appointees. So what's your recourse? You go to court, right? Guess what? They don't have to. I got a court order already. All they have to do is go to court and say, Your Honor, former Mayor Thomas got a court order to stop this obstruction and enforce it. Hopefully they do that. Every administration, no matter what it is, should have the right to appoint whoever they want to work with them. Now, I don't know what the process is on the council now. I was a council member. I was a mayor. But what I do know is that as former mayor, the council and the comptroller worked actively to undermine the administration. And that's not me talking. That's what's in the court order. Those are facts. So what do you do when you have a court order that says they're politically motivated to sabotage your administration? You try to work with them no matter how much.
Now, is that written in a court order?
It is. It says because of political animus and sabotage.
Those words are in there.
Those words are in Judge Lefkowitz's order. Absolutely.
Do you have a copy of that? Would you
Yes.
get it to us?
I will get it to you. It's on page 2 on the bottom.
Okay. I want to cover something.
And you just
more
ask yourself
broadly.
why. And I just want to point out this, and this ties into the story,
Yeah,
because they're
please do.
saying they fired Lauren Carter because she supported Wallace. That's what they said, right? So think about that. Now, here comes her position. Oh, I was politically retaliated against. Think about me for a moment. I'm saying, hey, I got the DEC and the DOJ breathing down my neck, and they're saying, so what? Tell them to go take a hike. We want to protect illegal debris at Memorial Field. That's what it boiled down to. And somebody had to take a stand for the taxpayers and say, look, we're not going to let the DOJ just say they're going to impose a $250 million penalty on the city of Mount Vernon. And guess what? Before I got out of office, I had an agreement with the DOJ that brought the penalty down to $750,000 because they said you took extreme actions under extreme obstruction.
So-
and the moment I got out, the deal fell apart, and they filed for summary judgment against Mount Vernon.
So is it fair to
just-
say, because Ken, keep in mind, I
Yep.
think I owe you to say this, since there's a suit and the very nature of the show is to get you on the record, there are people who will listen, and you've recorded it yourself, you're on the record with this. Is that your reason for knocking it down?
To comply with the environmental mandates, that is part of it. And the big part of it is do the math. they threatened us with a $2.5 million penalty for not testing below the courts.
Now, could you? And I don't need to play prosecutor here, but you know, in the lawsuit, if you're trying to help the city out, they're going to say, were there other ways to test the soil underneath?
And we asked for access to do that, and every chance they got, they blocked us from doing it. So we invoked our rights under the contract and terminated their operating license in April. We gave them more than 30 days to vacate. They had approximately 60 days. The contract only calls for 30. There's nothing in there that says you have to go to court. There's nothing in there that says you have to get anybody else's permission. The contract is a contract. They shouldn't have signed it if they didn't like the terms of the contract.
We have about 13 or so minutes left, and maybe we can go a little bit over. And I wanted to give you a broader field, and I'll start out with this question. I mean, I wanted you to come on because of some of these issues, and as you know, I'm well aware because of records I've seen how the comptroller and other people did not respond to your inquiries, et cetera. But why are you here today?
Well, part of it is I just feel it's important to call it out. And this is where business and politics don't mix. And I think about Bernie Sanders, Bloomberg, and Trump. Mm-hmm. You know, Trump's tweet last night is spot on. They're trying to steal it from Bernie Sanders again. The people, they're rocking with Bernie Sanders, even though he's far out there and a socialist and all that respects. But I listened to your interview before I got on with the councilman saying he wanted to see lower rents to get businesses in these empty storefronts. That's a form of socialism, if you want to call it that, right?
Yes.
So I just want to be clear, like, let's not kid ourselves. Bernie has some ideas that are resonating. Bloomberg has the ability to fight fire with Trump. Mm-hmm. It's between those three for me right now because those are the only three that seem to be getting everybody's attention.
Yes.
But nonetheless, Trump was right. Trump is a business person that does not mix at all with the politics. He's trying to cut whatever kind of deal he can cut to advance whatever he's trying to advance. Bloomberg, I think he's one of the best choices. I think Bernie has some great ideas. But that's where my hope is that everybody gets angry enough to support someone that's not going to separate families, someone that's not going to be so maniacal and cruel as Trump has been to people. But again, Trump is doing a lot of things that's giving everybody pause. And that's why
want. Yes, of course.
And that's why I'm just saying, look, it's going to be a real race this November. And when you come back to why I'm here because when you look at Mount Vernon, look at the choices. I came in very much in a way saying, look, principles, business principles, trying to get things to work properly, saving money on street lights, going to the city, not to a friend of the former mayor. There's political motivation to get retribution for taking those monies away from people that were counting on it. Wallace in specific, he's in court right now with his business partners. Why? They're suing him because some real estate deals that they had going on in Mount Vernon did not happen. Why? Because Wallace approached me saying, look, I want you to sell me multiple city properties. You know, I'm going to control all these different companies and, you know, you'll get a piece on the side. And I'm like, dude, I'm not doing that. I'm not here to take advantage of the people.
Now, you may be called to stand by that.
I've said it time and time again. I said it back in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, right now. Like, I've said it over and over and over again. And he's in court right now being sued because real estate deals did not go right. Think about that. I said I wanted to have a process that made city-owned property available to everybody, not just public officials or certain chosen few. I wanted it to be fair. But guess what? Let's do the math, everybody. And you want to talk about motivation? Geez, you're talking about a $20 million scheme. If this guy got about 50 properties, which he really wanted, at about, let's say, $15,000 to $20,000 each, and he used money, grant money from the Urban Renewal Agency, which he wanted, he would have probably came out of pocket, let's say, $300,000 or $400,000. I'm doing the math for everybody.
No, I get you. No,
but if we sell
those
properties,
might that have been beneficial to the public had he done it, though?
But the process. Think about the process, right? My objective is to have a process that's transparent, legal, and ethical. This was not a legal, ethical process that I felt comfortable with that he was suggesting. And when you do the math, no matter what he sold the house at, he would have profited maybe $200,000, $250,000 each. You do 200 times 50 is what? That's $20 million. That's a lot of money. That's a big motivation to try and get Richard Thomas. Because I stood in the way from somebody and somebody else behind him that had their tentacles into influencing his decisions. I stopped them from taking advantage of taxpayers, people, ordinary people, blue-collar people. And this is where I'm just like, why is it so hard to fix Mount Vernon? Why is it so hard to fix a street light? Why is it so hard to fix a traffic light or a pothole? What is up with our money? And that's why I don't understand. How come Mount Vernon does not have its financial game together? Because it's benefiting somebody. Who? Don't know. But my hope is that we get to the bottom of it, because I'm tired of the nonsense. I'm tired of it. The taxes in our city are out of control, and I'm tired of them trying to come at me as if I'm doing something. I did nothing but try to do my job. I tried to run Mount Vernon like a business, and that was the problem, running Mount Vernon like a business.
Two other things. Well, politics, as you know, isn't business, nor frankly should it be. You had commissioned, while you were still the mayor, and having moderated a debate among the four candidates at the time, everybody said they were gung-ho for this commission to look at the charter.
Yep.
Is anyone following up on that?
The Charter Revision Commission is still available. I hope they take...
This Mr. Derrickson Lawrence was heading this
but
up, correct?
As I heard from members of the commission, they've been intimidated. And
how do you get intimidated? These are grown-ups. How are they intimidated?
Look, when you hear comments like, I'm going to take you out like Thomas by the controller, there's a group of people that is, puppeting everybody, and they're intimidating people. They already told Delia Farquharson and Janice Duarte, if you guys break ranks and you continue to try and be independent, they're going to remove them the next election. Something else is going on. It's in our face. It's so obvious, but it's hard for some people to comprehend, because they're like, no, that can't be true. But look at Memorial Field. It was illegally dumped on. Nothing happened. And monies, millions of dollars that, should have gone elsewhere, went to cleaning up Ernie's mess, and nobody's talking about going to Ernie to get paid back. They're just like, oh, he forgot. You just got to look at it for what it is. And this is where, again, I'm saying I came in to do a job. I came in to get Mount Vernon on the right track. I'm happy the county's taking steps to put more money into the project. I think there are a few things that they can think about. I think a grass field is better, but that's me just being, I love grass, not turf. The tennis courts, I think a compromise could be reached with them. You could give them back their operating license. I even offered, when I was there, monies for when they shut down, just to kind of help them make it through while we do the renovations and cleanup. But the council said no. So what are you supposed to do? You got the DEC and the DOJ saying we're taking you to court. They took us to court. They penalized us. So this is where I just find it very obvious. They needed me out of the way because they want to settle that, and somebody's going to get paid off. That's what's going to happen.
Mayor Thomas.
Not the people. The people are going to get taken advantage of again.
You could fade into the night, come back on the scene after your settlement with the Attorney General's office is such that you could even run for office again in another 6 months or whatever it is.
I'm not interested.
But here you are, fanning some of the embers, and people are going to say to you, why is he doing that? Why doesn't he just move on?
I'm doing it because there's too much misinformation out there, and I'm doing it because I'm one of those people like Mitch that's listening and just right. You have to speak on it, right? Mm-hmm. So that's me. I'm not. I wasn't raised to just keep my mouth shut. I was raised to speak truth to power, and in this case, I'm doing it because it's a combination of, one, I love Mount Vernon, and two, I'm trying to move on with my life, but they keep coming at me like, hey, this guy's a problem.
Coming at you, other than comments in the newspapers, and of course you've been not named necessarily as a defendant, but you've been named in some of the lawsuits for decisions that you made. But they're not coming at you directly. Most of it's comments, is it not? The
insinuations, the inferences. You look at the comments or the messages that come. Let me just put it like that, with the wind. Just move on. Like, they got control of Mount Vernon. They're making the decisions that they want to make. They want to roll over and pay off their friends and their family members, be it on the tennis bubble or something else. You know what? Go ahead, let them do it. I hope that that the highest authority, the good Lord, really judges at the end of the day And I'll know that no matter what happens, my conscience is clear. I just want to focus on moving forward. But every time I turn around, I'm getting pulled back into something. And I'm like, look, I'm done. You guys got this. You're still bickering and fighting. It's obvious that something else is going on. It ain't me. So leave me alone. That's basically why I came out. Just end it. But guess what? They still want to keep fighting. So if they want to keep fighting, they're going to expect me to fight back. Mm-hmm. And the truth is the truth. And I dare anybody to look at Wallace's lawsuit with his business partners. I dare you. And you'll see how it all ties up. Because that's the political motivation. Because somebody wanted to make $20 million off the people of Mount Vernon. And I was like, you know what? That money, if anything, should go to the people of Mount Vernon.
Although, to be fair to former Mayor now Wallace,
ask him about it.
What if that had benefited? What if he got money from the Urban Renewal Agency and he had really nice affordable housing? It had to be
done legally, ethically, morally, and if the
which you don't think it was.
If the rules were followed, they prohibit sitting public officials to receive those dollars. That's why the soup kitchen got into, a situation with my administration. And I made it clear to former council president Roberto Apuzzo, this is not me saying I don't want to give you money for soup kitchen. I believe in it. I grew up hungry. I grew up in poverty. I get it. That's why we have a feeding program where every week we give away 15 to 20,000 pounds of fresh produce. Think about it. I believe in what she does. But the federal government said, Mayor Thomas, you can't give her that money because she's a council member. That's what they said. They even put it in writing. But even still, all the politicians lined up behind her and said, Richard Thomas is a bad guy because he won't give money to the soup kitchen. It's like, come on, y'all. Like, y'all got the letter.
Mayor,
so why y'all beating up on me for doing what they told me, I must do?
As you look back,
yeah,
you're still a very young man, and you've learned a lot, obviously. And one day you'll be able to have a fresh start, even without any kind of a record based on the deal you cut. Is there anything you would have done differently with what you've learned?
Yeah, I think from a timing standpoint, I may have waited to run for mayor until I was in a different situation with my young kids and my wife. I think I would have said, you know what, I like the mission of what the Justice Democrats are trying to do, and I like what Jamal Bowman is saying, but the reality is, Congressman Engel has been our congressman for a long time. He has seniority. He helps a lot of people. His staff is great. But can he do things, a little bit more progressive? Sure. But the reality is, there's a balance. There's an order of things. So I'm not saying I'm here to, kiss Reggie Lafayette's ring. I'm here to say maybe I would have waited a little bit longer to run for mayor. This way, my kids could be a little bit older and the family could be more established. Right now, you're right. I'm young. I have a variety of different opportunities ahead. But the experience was amazing. I learned a lot about how people work. I learned a lot about human nature, and I learned a lot of surprising things about government. And my hope is that the people in Mount Vernon wake up and really dig in and demand change through the Charter Revision Commission. They need to back them up.
Because that's something I just as an analyst, looking at this politically, I always thought your city needed. I think that the controller position, has become an impediment to that town.
Yep.
I think that perhaps even a city manager form of government might work. But that's just my layman's take, Mayor. Any advice that you would give with what she's going through now? Sean Patterson Howard, it's still all in front of her, let's face it. I mean, she had this dust up. She had to deal with this politicization at the city council. No surprise there. What advice would you give her at this point, based on what you went through?
Stick with your faith. That's it. You know what's right, and you know what's wrong, and just stay close to your faith, and that's the only thing I can say.
Because she does have, she had the support of the party, even though they didn't endorse her directly, but after the primary and when she ran, they did. She's got the support of the party. Do you think she can count on that going forward if she continues to fight the powers that be?
Well, it all depends on what Reggie Lafayette says, so she can go talk to Reggie about that.
All right, Richard Thomas, thank you very much, the former mayor of Malvern. We do hope you'll come back.
Yeah, look, I'd love to come back, and I want to do that podcast called The Prick. Remember that?
Well, no. You explain what that means, though, before people think you're being.
So look, I know we're going a little overtime, but
What does that mean? That was an acronym, though. You called it the prick.
Well, the
like
prick,
as an
it's an example.
You may want to say probe, like when you say you stick
when you get a splinter in
when
your
you
hand,
probe yeah.
and you probe things, and you get you literally get pricked.
Yeah,
by
I know
something.
that's what you meant. But I think we're going to give you a better name if you're going to start podcasting.
We'll see what happens. No, we'll get a better name.
No, because that's just not that one's not going to sell in Peoria. Do you remember that from the old? You were too young. The Nixon administration. His workers would say, rather his campaign people, when they come up with something, Middle America was always defined as Peoria. So they said that's not going to sell in Peoria.
Oh wow! No, I didn't know that.
That one's not going to sell in Mount Vernon, I don't think. All right, Mayor Thomas, thank you very much.
Thanks for the time.
All righty, folks, that slams the lid on things for today. 10:02. We have some people to thank, of course, Mayor Thomas, Ivar Hayden, Vince Russo, Jake Schaefer, Harlan Ullman, and Mitch. We got a hold of Mitch today. He came in. Now, I know Anthony was trying to get on. We're going to see if we can make some time for him. We had some shorter shows early in the week for maintenance here. We'll get him on as the week comes through, and some of the other callers. We also want to thank our sponsors, United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management and their partners, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne & Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. Now, tomorrow, Thursdays are a fun day. John Bailey from White Plains is in to see us. We will hear from, and you got to look forward to this, folks. What will the former county executive, Andy Spano, have to say about some of the things going on with the election? Of course, we have the now fight between two, it seems, really. Mr. Sanders and, of course, Mr. Michael Bloomberg, the president's pardoning of those individuals, and so much more to talk about with him. And we'll talk with our friends at Choice. That's tomorrow right here on Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. This is Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. Go to MyTuner Radio. That is where people get their podcasts from. We stream live, but we podcast segments as well when we're done. So please go to MyTuner Radio. You can go on the Mornings with Bob Marrone app. You can go on Mornings with Marrone, actually. You can go to RadioWestchester.com, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Periscope, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. We're on all of them. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you in the morning. as they want to hear.
Well, I think a big part of it is, I want to say uninformed.